Members of the Licensing and Standard Committee, please report to the Council Chamber for quorum. Thank you.
está.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting to order. First and foremost, I want to welcome you all to the 10th meeting of the License Standards Committee meeting this term. And yes, we have quorum. Also, I would like to extend a warm welcome to members of the public and those who are watching live online or television. As usual, I would like to remind everyone that you can find the agenda for today's meeting and follow the meeting in real time at www.toronto.ca/council. Are there any declarations under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, members of the committee? Seeing none, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of January 22nd, 2016? Councilor Mamuliri, all those in favor? Against? Carry. Thank you. As speakers, we have this list of deputants that's been distributed to members of council. In terms of communications, there is a communication from the chair dated April 7, 2016 that needs to be introduced and to be part of the agenda. Can I have a member of the committee to move? Councilor Carijanes, thank you. All those in favor? Against? Carry. So we have an additional item on the agenda. That's a new item that was just introduced. Councilor Malo.
I have a new business item that is currently being prepared. Would you allow me to submit that perhaps at a later point in the agenda?
Absolutely, Councilor.
Thank you.
Thank you. What's the nature of the item, Councilor?
It's simply a report request regarding the right of entry permit bylaw. This is something that's been requested by staff. My staff are just working on putting it together and putting it on letterhead, and I just don't have it ready with me right now.
Thank you, Councilor. And I think that it will be up to the committee, Councilor Mamuliri, we'll have an opportunity to vote on it, okay? Thank you. I'm going to make a few remarks, specifically regarding item LS 10.3 that deals with a new vehicle for hire by law that regulates the Toronto ground transportation industry. By now, all members of the committee have the list of speakers that was distributed this morning, and it was also posted on the city's website. For those of you who haven't registered to speak and are not on the speakers list, but who want to speak, you should register with the clerk. The clerk is located on Committee Room 2 on the second floor. I am proposing that we close the list of speakers at 10:30 this morning. If you have not registered with the clerk by then, you will not be able to speak to the committee. To ensure that the meeting goes smoothly, the speakers list is going to be posted online at www.toronto.ca/council and will be updated continuously throughout the meeting. When I call your name and number, please come forward to speak at the microphone that's right in the front. I will call the names in batches of 5, so you can come down to the front, and when it's your turn, you can come forward to the mic. Since we have a large list of speakers on this item, I propose that the speeches be limited to 3 minutes. Then members of council will have an opportunity to ask questions for 3 minutes also. As chair of the committee, please be assured that I will conduct this meeting in a very responsible way. I will oversee a balanced, thoughtful, and respectful discussion throughout the meeting, as I always do. As chair of the committee, it is my job, my friends, and that's my responsibility to maintain decorum and civility in this chamber, and we should all respect each other and respect the committee's proceedings, and please don't do anything that might disrupt the meeting. This includes clapping, cheering, and shouting out when speakers are making their speeches. And when councilors are asking questions, you can use perhaps body language, but please, let's be respectful. However, if I feel that someone is being disruptive, I will not hesitate to have security remove anyone from this meeting. I will also not hesitate to clear the chambers if the meeting is disrupted. Friends, I understand this is a very difficult and complex issue for all of us, for members of council, for all the stakeholders. It's an emotional issue, and that's irrespectively on what side of the issue you are or we are. There are a lot of concerns. I understand that we are dealing with significant changes in this report. Many in the industry are very frustrated with the recommendations. I know that you want a level playing field. You want a balanced approach, a system that's fair, equitable, and financially sustainable to the industry. On the other hand, the riding public has sent a strong message to embrace innovation and new technology. That's the proposed PTC, UberX, that are going to face regulations for the first time on issues that the public care about it, such as public safety and consumer protection. Members of the committee, it is our job as regulators to try to strike a balance to ensure that regulations are fair and aren't too difficult to either side to achieve. I want to be very clear as chair of the committee that I will ensure that this item is not going to be hijacked by any member of City Council in any way, either by receiving it, deferring it, or killing it. This item will go to City Council, where it belongs. There will be attempts by members of council, perhaps members of the committee, to derail this item. That will not happen. I agree with Mayor Tory that this item should go to City Council, and that's it. Point of privilege, Councillor Mamolidi.
Mr. Chairman, I tried to stand up earlier after seeing a member of council who doesn't sit on this committee try to stand up on a point of privilege. After she did that, she started, she was out of order in my opinion while you were speaking, and she kept going. I think you need to set the tone for members who don't sit on this committee to not come in here and try to bamboozle the committee either by interjections.
Thank you, Councillor. To that point, any visiting member of council have the same rights like any member of the public, and the fact that they are not members of the committee, there is no points of privilege or points of order.
Right.
Thank you.
That's my point.
Point of order, Councillor Karjianis.
Sir, I don't think it's up to any one of us to say how this is going to go today and what members of this committee are allowed to do and not to do. You and I, sir, have the same privileges, and to tell us that you won't allow this and you won't allow that, I think that certainly puts you in a precarious situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Karigianis. This is not point of order. Your point of order doesn't reflect errors in terms of procedure or a breach of the rules. As a chair, I do have the right to express what needs to be done in terms of fairness to everyone, and this item should go to City Council where it belongs. That's my point. Thank you. Now, so I'm going to ask the clerk to display motions on committee procedures that, as it relates to LS 10.3, before we begin. And certainly. So the first motion, yeah, there we have, yeah.
Yes, they can speak to you.
The speaker, okay, there we have. The first one, that speakers who have not pre-registered be allowed to register to speak until 10:30 in the morning on April 14, 2016, after which no further registration is allowed and the speakers list will be closed. Number two, that the length of public presentations be limited to 3 minutes. Number three, the questions of speakers by members of council, including members of the Licensing and Standards Committee, be limited to 3 minutes with one round of questions per councillor. Number four, that questions to staff from members of council, including community members, take place after the public deputations and be 5 minutes in total with one round of questions per councillor. And number five, that speaking times for all members of council be 5 minutes with one round of speaking per councillor. So those are the motions that Councillor De Vermaker.
To speak to the motion, Mr. Chair, I've been on this council for this, I guess, my 13th year now. I've never supported limiting the time that's been allotted to the members of the public. They've taken 8 hours off of work today to come and have at least their 5-minute say for us to tell them on the morning that they've come here and they've prepared their speaking notes, and some people speak regularly, some don't, to say to a person, you thought you had 5 minutes, now you only have 3 minutes because Councillor De Vermaker wants to get home early tonight. I think it's not appropriate. I think we are paid to be here. We are paid to listen to deputants, to get input. In order for me and all of us to make informed decisions, I want the privilege to follow and support our existing procedures and allow all the deputants their 5 minutes. I'm also will not support the additional amendments or motions here to say that we're going to deviate from normal procedure to limit myself or other members of this committee to have less time to ask questions. It took me an hour just to read the 103 recommendations. And now you want me to question staff about a $1 billion a year industry in 3 minutes, and I can only have one round of
Council
questions?
is 5 minutes to members of council. And
With one round, yeah. So
Just
on
one
that
round,
for
yeah.
so, Mr. Chair, I just will not support these. I think the city's
That's fine.
instituted good procedures to have democratic debate, informed debate, and if any one of my colleagues on this committee wants a second round of questions or a third round about 105 recommendations, I may ask our executive director 5 minutes just on the age of when you can drive, or about insurance, or about safety inspections. So I may be asking for a second or third round of questions. I don't know, but I will vote against this, and I'd ask my colleagues this is not appropriate given the magnitude of this issue. Thank you.
thank you, Councillor. That's your right. Is you can vote against. Councillor Mamolidi.
Mr. Chairman, I'm afraid that while I've supported these types of motions in the past, it is just too big, I think, of a bylaw for us to limit not only the deputants that are here with 3 minutes, but I certainly believe that we as members of council who have something to say on this matter shouldn't be stifled at all with 3 or 5 minutes. I think that we should be given the opportunity to give our opinion, and in my case, it's a very lengthy opinion, longer than 5 minutes, and I'll give you all that warning ahead of time. So I just can't support what's in front of us. I think we should allow us the opportunity to ask questions and to speak longer than 5 minutes as council members as well, given the complexity of this particular issue and the direction that the city's going in. I think it's just, I think it's a must. I think we should be allowed to speak. And secondly, Mr. Chairman, I'll give you notice at this particular time that I don't agree with anything that's in front of us, and that I think it should be deferred. And I think that we should be given an opportunity to suspend our particular procedural bylaw for some of us to argue the point of deferral before we continue with this. And I know that it's not the norm, and I know the clerk's probably got something to say to you right now. But at the end of the day, my objective here is to defer this until we get it right. And it's just not right in front of us. And I just think it's a waste of 100 deputants' time if some of us want to defer this back to staff to redo it.
Councilman Maliri, are you moving in deferral at this point?
I'd like to, if you allow me to, I'd like to
No,
defer
if you're
it.
moving deferral, and then we'll get into the debate of forum, we'll have to take a vote, and then we'll. Yeah.
I'm just asking for us to get into a debate on deferral and the logic for deferral. That's a little different than the norm. I get that, Mr. Chairman, but
I've been advised by the clerk that if you're moving deferral, the vote must take immediately without debate.
there's no debate on deferral?
Please.
If there are deputants present, there is no debate on deferral of the item. The item must be voted, the motion to defer must be voted on immediately after the motion is placed.
Mr. Chairman, I totally disagree with what's in front of us. I think more work needs to be done on this particular bylaw, and I defer the item back to staff for another month.
We have to finish
So
this.
we have a motion for deferral at the moment. So
Mr. Chair, we have a vote here in front of us first. I think that this second motion would be dealt with after this motion.
in terms of the motion of deferral goes first before anything else. So this motion comes first, and we have to vote on it now. Yes. Thank you. So just to be clear, once we deal with this and then the deferral, we cannot deal with that once again. So we have a motion before us for the deferral. Is all those in favor of the
Recorded vote, please.
recorded vote has all those in favor of the deferral? Councilor Mamuliri. Against? Councilor De Beremaker, Di Giorgio, Carijanes, Malo, and Palacio. Illuses. Now we have the next speaker on the recommendations that I put forward, Councilor Di Giorgio. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any particular problem with trying to limit some of the deputations simply because, and I think you should make this very clear at the start, what we have before us are 102 recommendations. I'm not sure that the deputants are going to confine themselves, 102 recommendations, and I'm not sure that the deputants will confine themselves to merely which recommendations they agree with or not agree with. What we may get, and I'm hoping we do not get, is a rehash of all the previous deputations about all the impacts, and we've all heard previous deputations on all the people in the industry. I think we should confine ourselves to the recommendations, and if we can't come to an agreement on which recommendations we agree with or disagree with, we can then look at possibly deferring for purposes of, at the end of the item, deferring the item to allow staff to bring forward clearer or add more recommendations.
Are you suggesting that to take the votes separately?
No, I'm not asking to take a vote now. What I'm asking is that we hear the deputants, but that you as chair instruct them that they should confine their comments to the
No, I-
actual recommendations that are before us.
Thank you. Is Councilor Karigiannis?
I have requested the clerk to make one change, if they're ready with it. Instead of limiting the councilors to one round, I requested, I believe, 3 rounds. 3 rounds to speak.
3 rounds to speak?
Sorry, questions. Questions, number 4, yes. Yes, question,
How
number 4.
minutes are you?
I'm looking for a maximum of 3 rounds of questions of staff, because we might not be able, since there's 102 recommendations, we might not be able to ask all the questions that we need to.
So Councilor Karigiannis is making an amendment to recommendation number 4, is
Which says with
to
one
allow,
round to 3
this
rounds
is
of
for
questions.
this is for members of council to speak up to 5 minutes with 3 rounds of questions per councilor. So he's making that amendment, so we'll have more opportunities to ask more questions to city staff. And that's to the point to Councilor Mamolidi as well. No, I'm sorry, Councilor De Vermeeke. So we have that amendment as well. Anything else? If not, so we'll take the vote, I guess, at this point.
Do it separately.
And
Could I
we
ask-
have,
Mr. Chair,
yes,
on a point of order, could I ask that they be voted on sequentially, one at a time?
one at a time. Yeah, we have a request from Councilor De Vermeeke to vote on separately on each one of them. Councilor Mamolidi.
Mr. Chairman, I made it clear that I have my own particular views that could be more than 5 minutes. I think most of the council members probably are in the same position. This is something we want to talk about and not be limited. I'm wondering whether or not, instead of cutting us off after 5 minutes in speaking, that you'd entertain a motion that allows us to go 10 minutes to speak without an interruption after 5 minutes.
We'll put it down.
I'm moving that motion.
Just wanted to be, I want everyone to be mindful that this may, and I don't mind to come back tomorrow and to work around the clock to ensure that we are going to deal with this item. But also, please don't forget that we need quorum all the time. And that means I'm going to need your presence in the chambers all the time. So it's so we can carry the business of the day. And I don't have a problem with that. However, if there is any changes to any of the recommendations, and just give us 1 quick second, please. So we have those changes now, and we are going to go to recommendation number 1. Recommendation number 1, that's, we are going to vote on recommendation number 1, that's displayed already there. All those in favor? All those in favor? Recommendation 1, we are,
When we get to...
when we have 5
those
recommendations.
amendments, we'll do them.
We'll get to the amendments after. Recommendation number 1, all those in favor? Against? Carry. We'll go to recommendation number 2, that the length of public presentations be limited to 3 minutes.
Ask for, sorry, Mr. Chair, for the rest, could I ask for recorded votes?
Okay, recorded vote. All those in favor? Is on number 2. All those in favor? Councilor Di Giorgio? Against? De Vermeeke, Mamolidi, Karigiannis, Malo, and Palacio. It carries. So the
It
number
loses. It
number
loses.
3. Yeah.
It loses. It's okay.
It's
He's
okay.
allowed to.
It's okay.
Just say that means that Deb's...
No, I
Okay. Right. It's fine.
Number 3, that question of speakers by members of council, including members of the Licensing Standards Committee, be limited to 3 minutes with 1 round of questions per councillor. All those in favor? Recorded vote, Councillor Di Giorgio, Palacio, Carigianes, Malo. Against? The Bermaker and Mamoliri. It carries.
Right, now, call out that one because that's the
Yep.
amendment.
Now we have recommendation number 4 with an amendment, and the recommendation now reads: the questions to staff from members of council, including members of committee members, take place after the public deputations, be 5 minutes in total, with 3 rounds of questions per councillor. Recorded vote. All those in favor?
This is the amendment.
That's what the
3
amendment.
rounds.
3 rounds, 3
3 rounds
rounds
of 5
of
minutes.
questions.
3 rounds of 5 minutes each. 5 minutes.
So to be clear, once again, that questions to staff from members of council, including committee members, take place after the public deputations, be 5 minutes, with 3 rounds of questions per councillor. All those in favor? Councillor De Vermaker, Mamoliri, Carigianes, Madlo. Against? Di Giorgio, Palacio.
Okay.
It carries. And the last recommendations,
With an amendment from council.
and that includes the amendment from Councillor Mamoliri, that speaking times for all members of council be 10 minutes with 1 round of speaking per councillor. All those in favor, record it?
Yeah.
All those in favor? Councillor Mamoliri, Carigianes, Madlo, and the Vermaker, it carries.
That was unanimous.
That's unanimous.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me move this out. Da-da-da. Everyone will get 5 minutes.
Okay, members of the public and members of council, just to be clear in terms of what just happened and what was approved. We will consider, we have 4 items at the moment. Item LS 10.1, 10.2, and 2 new items. 10.3, that's the main item, and also 10.4, that's from the chair. And at the moment, also I have an additional item from Councillor Madlo that needs to be introduced, so it will be part of the agenda. So we need to move this item to be part of the agenda. Can I have a mover?
They haven't seen it yet, Councillor.
So what we are going to do is to allow the members of council, so this item be circulated and you have an opportunity to take a look at it, we'll introduce a little bit later. Thank you. So we have those items, and that are going to be distributed. Regarding this specific item, we are going to hear from everyone who has registered by 10:30 this morning. Everybody will have 5 minutes to speak. Each member of council can then ask questions up to 3 minutes. Members of council who are members of the committee will ask their questions first, visiting members. When the presentations are finished, members of council may ask staff questions for 3 rounds of 5 minutes. Members of council who are not members of the committee will ask their questions first. After all councilors have asked staff questions, members of council who are not members of the Licensing Standards Committee will have an opportunity to speak for 10 minutes. Then members of the committee will have the opportunity to speak for 5 minutes and make motions to vote. Now, let's begin with the first item. Is on this one. Yeah, we voted already on that one. So we'll start with item 1.
Hold.
He wants to hold item 1.
No. It's I'm going to go through the items. We have the first item. We have the deputants, so that item is going to be held. Item number 2, we have deputants going to be held. And number 3, we have a lengthy list of public speakers is being held. All the items have been held, and now we'll get to deputations. They were just registered with the clerk. Yeah. So on the first item, I have the first deputant, and that's Daryl Chung.
There are no speakers for number 1 and 2. We got speakers for number 3. Oh, 2. For 1 and 2? Oh, okay. Sorry, there's 2.
On item 1, I have a deputant. So it's Mr. Daryl Chung. Good morning. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Can you hear me? Now you can. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Palacio and members of the committee. I'm Daryl Chung. I'm the president of the Greater Toronto Apartment Association. My association is a group of landlords that operate purpose-built rental buildings in Toronto and the surrounding area. In our membership, there's about 150,000 suites. In regards to this matter, just to let you know, the installation of window air conditioning units is allowed in a vast majority of apartment buildings. This has always been the case for decades since little window units were introduced. However, the majority of residents do not and have not opted to do this. The Reducing Health Risk from Extreme Heat Apartment Buildings report from June of 2015 from the Medical Officer of Health acknowledged that there's substantial barriers to achieving this in the short term. Further in that same report, they note the mechanical, structural, and technical problems of doing so. So this is a complex issue. Most of Toronto's buildings were developed prior to the introduction of air conditioning and therefore don't have any ductwork. These buildings were designed with windows that are now restricted to be open no more than 10 centimeters. So having noted the above, the Greater Toronto Apartment Association and its members wish to be invited to participate as stakeholders in the consultations referenced in the report and work with staff and others on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the deputant? Councilor Mamolidi, please go ahead.
Mr. Chung, I hold the position that there are many things at City Hall that shouldn't be at City Hall. That legislation is legislation and it's provincial. And, I hold the position that we're doing a lot of things down here that aren't within our mandate, in my opinion, and it costs us as taxpayers in the City of Toronto a lot of money. This is one of those issues where legislation comes from the province. The province doesn't have the willingness to enforce or want to go out and deal with their own legislation and pawn it off to the City of Toronto. What's your association's position on that?
So on this particular matter, we've always left it in the hands of residents to choose to air condition or not air condition their windows. So we just think that the city should continue that.
Do you believe that the province should just write legislation and not enforce it and expect its municipalities to cover the cost of their legislation?
Oh, no, never. We never support issues like that.
Would you agree that in this particular case, that may be the issue?
In this case, I'm not exactly sure, but I think the consultations will show that there's other ways of handling this. So this is okay.
Do you think that the City of Toronto has enough inspectors to be able to deal with these issues?
In regards to window air conditioning units, they don't actually inspect unit by unit. I think they just do a visual from outside. I'm not sure. They probably have enough inspectors already.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to speak on this item? Please come forward. Good morning. If you can please just state your name.
Hi, my name is Jordy Dent. I'm the Executive Director of the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. Knowing that there's a lot of people waiting a long time today, I'm going to be very brief. I've been there myself. I did just want to touch upon a couple points. So first of all, we are in favor of the installation of a max temperature for a couple reasons. One, our tenant hotline gets about 10,000 calls a year. It's been operating since the 80s, and I can tell you that this is an ongoing issue for us. A lot of people are in apartments that are basically like furnaces, overheating, dealing with an ancillary number of health issues associated with that, with no practical way to control the issue. You heard our previous deputant state that a lot of people just have control over air conditioning. However, I've got a stack of emails and leases and notices in my office which show that many landlords are pressuring tenants not to put in air conditioners. Many of them are telling them they can't do that. Many of them are telling them that they have to pay illegal air conditioning charges in order to do so. This happened in Windsor in 2007, and 2 tenants died because they falsely believed that their landlord was accurate on this. In addition, if any of you have had the displeasure of going to my apartment, you'll know that in the summer it's a furnace, and air conditioning doesn't help. It doesn't help because of the way that the windows are set up, which is partially as a consequence of another bylaw that the city has around child-proof lock windows. It's the law of the land, so there's not much I can do about it, but ensuring that there was a maximum temperature and ensuring that landlords had a variety of options of dealing with this, just installing more durable screens instead of having to put in an AC unit, providing better ventilation. These are other options that we would ask the council to consider as fixes for this, in addition to some of the other things that have been mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions to the deputant? If not, thanks so much for your presentation. Any other speakers? If not, on this item, the recommendation is to adopt the recommendations from the Tenant Issues Subcommittee. Any questions to staff? Okay. Questions to staff, Councilor Mamolidi.
Yeah, I think you're going to hear these kinds of questions from me coming up regularly on issues that I believe are and should be provincially it already is provincially mandated, in my opinion. I think what's happened over time is that the council has taken on issues that cost us money, and we have come into, I guess, a practice of taking them on and absorbing it through our own budgets. I'd like to know, based on how many times I've been told that we don't have enough inspectors to deal with everything, including the taxi bylaw, for that matter, how do we have the amount of inspectors required to be able to deal with this provincially mandated and provincially legislated issue?
Through the chair to Councillor Mamolidi, are you referring to the maximum outdoor or maximum indoor temperature issue?
I'm referring to number 1, which speaks to the province's legislation, and we, for some reason, have decided that we're going to take on the enforcement of that legislation when I believe it should be the province.
It's my understanding the province does not regulate maximum indoor temperature.
Then how is it that we find ourselves in a position without inspectors to create recommendations that would send out our enforcement officers to deal with something that we clearly can't?
Well, I think, Councillor, this recommendation is to look at the feasibility of developing such regulations, and that would include part of that feasibility looking at the enforcement mechanism. Do we have the capacity to enforce, and is it practical to enforce?
So
at
it
this
could
point
very
in
well
time,
be that we're going to decide not to enforce?
it could be that I don't want to speak on behalf of Board of Health, but it could be that the determination is that we don't regulate maximum heat. Right now, it's just asking us to participate in looking at the feasibility of regulating maximum heat in a rental unit.
In this consultation that we're suggesting, what's the cost of that going to be to the City of Toronto?
I'll pass that off to the Toronto Public Health to speak to.
Thank you. We would not anticipate it being a very large cost. We currently have a technical advisory committee in which we've got representatives from across various city divisions to look again at the issue of feasibility of this initiative. The medical officer of health was asked to identify a temperature that's health-based, which would ensure adequate protection, and that's the nature of the report that was put before the Board of Health.
And I'm trying to do this non-confrontationally. I don't want to. I asked a question about costs, and your answer was it's not going to cost very much. What is the cost of these consultation meetings?
We have not fully mapped out the consultation itself. We don't have a cost estimate at this point. But we would, again, use all mechanisms such as notifying people over the internet, over the web, allowing people to make comments. We've already connected with some major stakeholders and representatives of different sectors of the public.
But there is a cost, and we're about to vote on something we don't know the cost of.
We could try to map out what the cost is, but again, I would say it's really a rather modest cost of a few person staff weeks to undertake this kind of consultation.
Consultation includes the public, and with that comes meetings of sorts, such as this one. There's a cost associated to that. I personally don't feel comfortable in voting on anything without knowing the cost of it.
Councilwoman Liddy, she mentioned that she doesn't have the numbers at this point in terms of cost.
Mr. Chairman, if that's the case, how are we supposed to vote for this if we don't have the numbers?
I think what the recommendation before the committee is to ask, to reiterate the cooperation and the collaboration between municipal licensing and Toronto Public Health to work on establishing feasibility.
Is the province helping with the cost of these consultations?
Yes, in fact, the province does help with the cost of these consultations because 75% of the budget from Toronto Public Health does come from the Ministry of Health. So yes, it's a very large contribution from the province for this kind of consultation.
Would you object to a motion for me that asks the province to cover the full cost of these consultations?
I don't think it's for me to object to that motion.
Any other questions? No. Well, that was your last question. Thank you. Councilor Karijanis, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. Do we have a figure of how many calls go to 311 when we have extreme heat or in the summertime? Have we gauged how many calls we got, how many complaints there's out there about hot oven apartments?
Through the chair to Councillor Karygiannis, MLNS, we do not respond to extreme heat issues. We don't regulate it currently with our bylaws, so I would ask that perhaps Toronto Public Health might have some information in regards to that.
Thank you, Chair. Is there any staff members here that can let us know how many calls we get at 311?
Do we have those numbers?
Through the chair to Councillor Karygiannis, we can undertake to get those numbers from our partners at 311, but we don't have that information normally available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If no question, speakers on the item? Councilor Maliri?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that the province, that the City of Toronto have the province cover the costs of this consultation process. And the reason I do that is because I am a staunch believer that we head down these, and I think you've heard me say this before here, that we head down the path of covering the costs of everything that belongs to the province. And we do that continually with the Board of Health. They seem to want to be the fix to everybody's problems, and at the end of the day, we don't have the dollars to be able to do that. This, in my opinion, is clearly a provincial matter, and somehow we have taken the reins obviously because of the calls that the councillors take on this issue, but without the resources associated to that. And it's just a continual thing that we keep doing down here. We are a municipal level of government. We're not a provincial level of government. And if we want to be a provincial level of government, then let's be clear, we're larger than most provinces already. Let's create our own provincial government of Toronto. Let's move in that particular direction, and we can deal with this and get the proper transfer payments from the federal government that we deserve as a much larger government as well. And until such time, I don't believe that we should be taking on these issues, be it air conditioning in a window, be it I think all of the health-related issues that we've had to deal with that are provincially mandated over the last few years. It's costing us a fortune. Hiring nurses to take care of, again, provincially run kind of health-related issues. We say we're going to do it temporarily. We do it for a year. We hire a couple of nurses. And then we're stuck after that year with a motion here on council that says we're going to continue hiring nurses and continue hiring these people and increasing our bureaucracy to deal with provincially mandated issues. You're going to hear a lot about this every time this comes up in council with respect to my arguments, because I don't think we have the money to be able to deal with these issues, and I think we need to send the province a message to say, deal with your own provincial matters and stop relying on municipalities to be your goats on these issues. And I think they do that regularly, and we fall for it. And I don't think we should fall for it anymore. And if we're going to fall for these things, then ask them for the money that we need to deal with this. In this case, I assure you that we're going to be standing here when the consultations are finished, and we're going to be debating how much this is going to cost and whether or not we have the enforcement officers to be able to deal with this. And there will be some motions put forward in this issue to increase the amount of enforcement officers to deal with these kinds of things. I just think that we should stop and recognize that we're just a level of government that doesn't have that money municipally, and we got to stop doing these sorts of things.
Thank you, Councillor Mamoliri. The next speaker is Councillor Marlowe.
Colleagues, as chair of the Tenants Issues Committee, I can tell you that maximum temperatures are an enormous priority to so many tenants across our city. The last 5 minutes, listening to Councillor Mamoliri, I can tell you that while he spoke about provincial purview versus city purview, the fact remains that this is not a provincial purview. The fact is, and you heard it from staff, that the city regulates these temperatures. So that speech, with all due respect, had nothing to do with the item that is before us right now. I ask you for your support, and as collective representatives who represent 50% of our city's population, who are renters, I ask you to do the right thing and support their interests today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marlowe. Any other speakers? If not, and we have a recommendation from Councillor Mamoliri. And the
Recorded vote.
recommendation is, yeah, we have, if we can display it, otherwise, the recommendation is that the City of Toronto request the province of Ontario to cover the funding cost of holding public consultations with respect to implementing maximum indoor temperatures standards for rental multi-unit residential buildings. Recorded vote.
Point of order.
Point of order.
I didn't realize
Councilman.
that this needed to be moved, given that it's, I thought this was actually just on the agenda because it's written here. So the clerk has just advised me that this needs to be moved. So I ask for your indulgence, Mr. Chair, to move the recommendation.
Yeah, I'm okay, Councilor Malo, with moving the recommendations. That should have been done at the very beginning, but...
I wasn't aware that it had to be done, but now that I am, thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. So we have a request for a recorded vote on Councilor Mamoulides' motion. All those in favor? Councilor De Bemaker, Mamoulidi, Carijanes, and Palacio. Against? Di Giorgio and Malo. Carries. Now, on the item as amended, is all those recorded vote, all those in favor? Councilor Di Giorgio, De Vermaker, Palacio, Malo, Carijanes. Against? Councilor Mamoulides. It carries.
Thank
you. Now we'll move on to item number 2, and we have 3 deputants that have registered on this item. And the first speaker is Daryl Chung, President and CEO of the Greater Toronto Apartment Association. Mr. Chung, please come forward.
You're asking.
I have copies of a letter if you want them. I printed them. I'll give them to the clerk here. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the GTA represents about 150,000 suites of purpose-built rental in and around the City of Toronto. I just want to let you know that the people who own and operate apartment buildings care about their tenants and the long-term value of their buildings. All of GTA's members see and value their tenants as customers. And more importantly, we support getting tough on bad landlords. I think most associations do that in their respective industries. But the vast majority of landlords don't fall into this bad category, and the city already has the tools to deal with the negligent ones. Respectfully, there hasn't been sufficient research, due diligence, and analysis to move forward with an apartment building licensing regime. The detailed rollout schedule and policy recommendations contained in the staff report or staff presentation in February to the Tenant Issues Committee came as a total surprise to our industry. Last June, in June 2015, MLS staff reported to this committee with a jurisdictional scan on landlord licensing regimes. In that report, MLS staff state, this report provides only a preliminary overview and draws no conclusions on licensing landlords in Toronto. That same report states more work is needed, including issue identification, public and stakeholder consultation, and cost analysis. As a next step, MLS staff advised that they would broaden the jurisdictional scan, conduct a detailed financial analysis of the MRAB program, engage in extensive stakeholder consultation, and only then would staff, and I quote from the report, analyze the results of the research and consultation and make recommendations to the Licensing and Standards Committee. So all this important work hasn't been done. There are lots of reasons against landlord licensing. The main one is the proposed licensing regime will add to tenants' costs and create another disincentive to build new affordable rental units in the City of Toronto. And more so, when MRAB program was introduced in 2008, city staff and city council opted against landlord licensing. So in addition to the research, analysis, and consultation discussed, we believe that it's important to consider how specifically this proposed licensing regime would be an improvement over the existing MRAB. The focus should be on how to effectively deal with a small group of negligent owners or operators. We also need to consider the full slate of tools available to improve the current MRAB program. So along these lines, respectfully, we request that the committee, if it were to pursue this, to add another recommendation that in May, should the executive director come back with a report, that they should compare the proposed licensing regime with the existing MRAB program, that the comparison of tools available to the city to ensure compliance with the relevant municipal bylaws under the proposed licensing regime be compared to that under the existing MRAB, and that other non-licensing approaches to improve MRAB be investigated. The GTA strongly supports any and all city efforts to aggressively pursue negligent landlords, and we're ready and willing to work with the city to achieve this common goal. However, staff's proposal to bring forward a landlord licensing regime via a staff report in May is premature in absence of deeper research into this and alternatives. On the surface, landlord licensing appears to be a done deal, in spite of the lack of committee or council direction to do so. The staff presentation that they made, that in the rollout of at the tenant committee, their staff presentation indicates that on May 19th, that they're going to report to L&S committee recommending that a multi-residential rental property license be developed for implementation in Jan 2017. Again, is this already a done deal? So respectfully, in regards to recommendation 1 in the staff report, we want you to change at least one word. In the first line, they have the word create. We'd like you to delete create and replace it with the word consider. So in closing, GTA strongly supports any and all city efforts to aggressively pursue negligent landlords, and we're ready and willing to work with the city to achieve this common goal. We hope this isn't already a done deal in the absence of all the promised research and reports. And in fact, going back through 2008, when we had a very lengthy discussion about this, we think this is the wrong way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilman Moliri?
There is a Landlord and Tenant Act.
Yes, there is.
Isn't that how traditionally we deal with landlords and tenants in this province?
Yes, that's the way the province of Ontario handles it. It's called the Residential Tenancies Act.
Are there any other parts of that legislation that would suggest that municipalities should get into this business?
No, in the past it was prohibited, but that prohibition has since been lifted. But in that act and through the Landlord Tenant Board, there's lots of recourse for municipalities to go after bad landlords. Our position is that the city already has all the tools available through this act to go after the bad ones, and they should focus on that.
Again, I argue that it shouldn't be a municipality that deals with it. That's where I come from.
We would agree.
So would you agree that the province, if they've got concerns with respect to this, it's their legislation, it's there for them to implement if they want landlords to be licensed?
Yes.
And how do other municipalities feel about this particular approach?
The vast majority of municipalities in Ontario do not have landlord licensing. The couple that do are restricted to houses, mostly to control student housing in and around campuses.
And would you believe that it might have an impact, this kind of bylaw might have an impact on future partners that want to perhaps build rental units in the City of Toronto?
Yeah, anything that doesn't seem to be friendly in a regulatory fashion or adds cost is another disincentive for people to build new purpose-built rental. Only recently have we started to see another slight bump up in the production of new rental, but stuff like this just takes the sail out of the wind out of our sails.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
The next deputant is Hal Misral. Hal Misral. Do we have Hal Misral? Yeah. Take your time, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Please go ahead.
I have spent good 10-plus years in property management. I used to run SRO buildings, regular apartments, welfare buildings. What I have seen being done in this province, too many landlords today are getting away with too much garbage. Example, landlords turn around, they're not living up to what tenants are paying for, constantly problems in the building, water getting not working properly, heat not working properly. One tenant will get a deal made if he's behind on rent. 70-year-old man got evicted 2 days ago that's paraplegic because he didn't have the full amount of the rent that he owed. He had $3,200 of it, and the property management company refused to do anything for him. But yet, I sat in a tribunal hearing on March 7th, watched them cut deals with other tenants. We have been fighting the property management company where I live for the last year on getting accessibility in our building. And this is getting, it's out of hand. It's time for owners of buildings, property management companies, all to be licensed properly in this city to put a stop to this kind of stuff. That's about all I've got to say on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Questions? Councilor Mamolidi. Excuse me, sir. You have a question from a member of council. Please come back to the mic.
Yes, sir.
I do this
Councilor
with
Mamolidi.
the utmost respect to the association or any tenants. I just, I think, believe it or not, my questioning would actually, if the answers were brought out through staff and otherwise, would actually help tenants in the long run. I think the province should be the ones to enforce this, the ones to move forward with. They have the resources to be able to do these things. Do you recognize that we just do not have those resources to be able to create a license and then enforce those licenses?
It falls down responsibility, be it the province or be it the city that takes on the responsibility. Somebody has to stand up and say enough is enough. These property management companies, these owners are getting away with murder in the way they treat tenants, and it is time to stop.
Wouldn't it be better, instead of us licensing them, for a recommendation from council to the province to recommend such a move in a provincially kind of
On cost factor, I would have to say that if the city stepped up and licensed the owners and the property management companies and such, and making them responsible to the city is going to generate a revenue to cover these expenses.
Do you recognize that we're going to be bloating up the bureaucracy at the same time if we do this?
I do understand that.
And
but
the taxpayers would have to pay for that bureaucracy at the end of the day.
Not necessarily, because then it comes back down to the fees that are being charged to the property owners and the property
Which
management companies.
You recognize that those fees will be absorbed and through fees to the tenants, that the landlords will only jack your rents up.
They're already doing that, sir.
But
They're already turning around and applying for above guideline increases for work that they failed to do themselves.
So
And
what-
we, the tenants, are the ones that are getting these increases put on us because for 20 years, they didn't bother upkeeping their buildings, and now they want to do above guideline increases
Right.
to cover their neglect.
And sir, that's my point, is that the more you do these things, at a municipal level anyway, because that's all I could speak to, the more they're going to increase your rents, because the province determines the definition of above guideline increases.
And
this
this-
will be an above guideline increase, and it means that it's going to cost the tenants more money in their rents.
And this is where there needs to be something put in place to stop these kind of increases for negligent landlords and property owners.
Again, this is not the level of government that would deal with that. It's the provincial level of government that can only deal with that. And wouldn't you agree that it's best that they just deal with this so that they can also pass the necessary amendments to the legislation around the increases that tenants could or would have to pay?
Well, if the province was to step in, I would have to turn around and say, then they need to also mandate these above-guideline increases
Right.
in a situation where you've got landlords that failed to upkeep their buildings for 20 years.
Right.
And all of a sudden now, because they've been forced to do the upkeep, now they're going after the tenants to pay for those maintenance charges that they should have done in the cost of business in the first place.
Okay, so last question then, because I think we're almost there, right? You get where I'm coming from.
Oh, yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about.
Some of us would absolutely love to do what you're asking, but what that would mean is an increase in your rents without us having an ability to change that. It would mean that we don't have the bylaw enforcement officers to deal with the issues that come out of this, or any other particular inspectors for that matter. It would just be better if we made a recommendation to the province to suggest that they look at it throughout the whole province and let them be the ones to come to the table and say that this is something they should be doing.
Well, this is where the city needs to step in and start taking control of their bylaw officers so they're shutting files before the jobs are even completed.
Sir, I can't even get an inspector to go take a look at a dog that's running loose in my park, let alone...
Believe me, I understand that one.
All right. Thank you.
Here.
Thanks, sir. The next deputant is Helen Chilas or Chilas. Good morning, ma'am. Good to have you here. Please go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Well, thank you and good morning. My name is Helen Chillis, and I'm on the board of directors with the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. I'm here actually to endorse and to continue increasing the capacity of the MRAB program, the Building Audit Program. I know that there is concern about the costs to the city. I, as a taxpayer, as a citizen of this wonderful city, am also concerned about the amount of money that citizens spend. The proposal that's being presented, again, is a cost recovery model. Now, I tend to not concur with the fact that this would be an above guideline increase. It is a fee, and it is not substantiated anywhere in law. So as far as rents being raised, when it comes to any sort of fees associated with landlord licensing, but perhaps we should consider looking at this a little bit differently. Are we really looking at landlord licensing, or perhaps we should be looking at the certification of buildings to have safe buildings, not just for renters, which now we constitute approximately half of the population of our city, and that is growing, but to extend that at some point to all buildings. The Canadian Housing Mortgage Corporation, almost 20 years ago plus, had warned property owners who had high-rises that they needed to start working on their repairs. Yes, the buildings back then were built to last a lifetime, but that is only when and if there is a concentrated effort to upkeep and maintain and repair buildings. For example, I'm not sure if you're aware, a building's roof only has a lifespan, according to the Ontario Building Code, of 20 years. The building that I live in now, it's 50 plus years old. There's never been a new roof, but the roof continues to leak. And it goes on and on. But again, I don't want to be here debating about what we should license or not license. It is more and specific about the safety and the well-being and the health of the citizens of Toronto, not only the ones, half the population that is renting, but we all have friends. What about the people working in buildings, et cetera, et cetera? Downtown, all the new condos that have been built, they're estimating that they probably have a lifespan of maybe 20, 30 years. What will happen to these buildings? I believe that there needs to be a concentrated effort to ensure that all buildings, and we can start with rental buildings because renters have been much more vocal, but I think it should eventually extend to all buildings in our wonderful city to ensure our safety. God forbid something happens. We need to move forward on that. Now, as far as the application of an audit program, yes, I agree. It's not working. It's not working in the kind of capacity it should be working. I live in a building whereby there have been over 17, according to request for information, there is 17,500 pages on my building alone. That must have cost the city quite a chunk full. I don't like to hear money wasted at all. However, there has been reinspection fees. Number one, I think the reinspection fees should be greatly increased. The Ontario government charges $265. Why is the City of Toronto shortchanging itself? We charge $94. Now, as far as any sort of laws that pertain to the application of property standards, that's already in our city bylaw 629. And it's very clear. No one shall rent or lease any apartment that does not meet building codes. The City of Toronto has the City of Toronto Act. That gives us the authority to set our own rules within the context of provincial code. Yes, again, we need more money for building certification, landlord licensing, call it what you want to call it, but it needs to be full cost recovery. I absolutely agree. What the city is proposing, something like $10, $15 an apartment, that's not much. And if that means the difference between being safe and not, I think the $10 is substantiated. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chinlas. Any questions to the deputant? Even Councillor De Giorgio.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Assuming that each property owner has to pay a licensing fee that is in the neighborhood of $10 or $15 per unit, in your estimation, how do we ensure that the property owners do a better job of dealing with the deficiencies in the building? Do we then withhold the renewal of the license?
That one option, yes.
And from a legal point of view, how is that better than what exists today? I mean, can the renters then decide to, because the city has not renewed the license, can the renters then decide to hold back on rental payments?
Well, we're not allowed, according to the Residential Tenancies Act, we are not permitted. We have to pay our rent, just like any legal leaseholder agreement. However, as far as the teeth of what is needed for enforcement, that is quite lagging. I know that the department needs to grow. However, it needs to have a much more inclusive approach, like, for example, public health. And they have put that in their report and their presentation and proposal, to include public health, to include even Enbridge for gas, to include the Electrical Safety Authority, to include the TSSA, the technical standards for the elevators. However, as far as how to make everyone respect the fact that we all need to be safe and to take pride in your building. I mean, this is your business. I don't understand. There needs to be, what I believe, fines on a per diem basis. None of this, you have until such day to complete.
Understood, but
yeah.
Is the primary reason then for allowing all property owners to pay for a license is that the primary reason to allow the city to then have enough money to step up their enforcement on the delinquent property owners? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, but also for the good, and I'm not suggesting there aren't good property owners and property management companies. They do exist, absolutely. However, there could be, as a consumer, because I am a consumer when it comes to the rental industry, as a consumer, I believe I have the right to be able to have access to the service and the product that I am consuming, my apartment, for example. And this would help. It could actually help.
We're not arguing that.
Yeah.
I think we're in full agreement. The reality is, how does the city finance going after the delinquent property owners? That's really what I'm looking at.
Okay, well, it would be through the very minuscule $10, but also to increase inspection fees, to be much more vigilant and not extend deadlines. I don't understand why there are extension of deadlines. I mean, there are no variables here. You're either up to code or not up to code.
And I think that's the preferred method for me, rather than to just allow property owners that are abiding by the law and are doing a good job to have to pay $10 or $15 per unit.
But that's why I had, maybe to rethink this a little bit, and it's not about only licensing landlords, but about the certification of safe buildings in our city. I mean, we talk about our aging infrastructure. We really don't talk about our aging buildings. And there are a lot, and they are growing. When you have the Canadian Housing Mortgage Corporation warning landlords even 20 years ago that they're going to run into these problems, and no one was listening, God forbid we have a huge disaster.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Ms. Chilas. Thank you for your presentation. Now, questions to staff. Councilor Mamalidi.
Can staff guarantee tenants that their rents are not going to increase if we decide to implement a recommendation of licensing on landlords?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think that's something that we're in a position that we could guarantee. It is possible that these costs would be blended in with a number of other costs, and the landlords may apply for an above-the-rent guideline increase.
Okay. So, in fact, what we're about to look into here could very well mean an increase in tenants' rents.
So through you, Mr. Chair, certainly the costs that we're looking at to fund this program and the cost of the licensing regime would not be exorbitant. We're talking in the $10 range, $10 unit range, and we have had these conversations with FMTA and the Federation for Rent, GTAA, and the residents associations. And as you've heard from the last deputant, they're not concerned that the cost would be so onerous that it would impact the tenants.
Okay.
But this is still a body of work we're yet to do, or
Okay.
to report back on.
Okay, they don't represent my constituency. My tenants represent the voice of my constituency. And many of them are seniors
Right.
who can't afford the $10.
Fair.
Can you tell us what the last increase to a Canadian pensioned senior would have been federally?
No. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, that's not information that I have. I will add, though, Councillor Mamalidi, we are conscious of the cost being passed through to the tenants, so I think it's a fair comment.
I do have the answer to my own question, and I think it's about $3 a month, maybe. And that's the percentage and the increase that's a yearly kind of increase to these tenants, or to the seniors who are tenants. A $10 hit to them could mean whether they eat one moment or not. Are we aware of that or no?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, it is approximately, the estimates right now, $10 per year per unit, and not including non-for-profit housing, et cetera. So that is a piece of the work that we would come back to committee with to have that discussion. We're very aware of the cost of regulation and its impact on tenants.
Do we have enough inspectors to be able to deal with these kinds of licenses and the issues that come out of it?
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's actually representative of the staff that we currently have in our MRAB program, plus a couple that we would shift out of our district to better flesh out that MRAB program. I think we'd be looking at maybe 3 incremental headcount to target on this licensing regime.
The license itself would mean an administrative setup, wouldn't it, with your department?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. We are taking that into consideration in the entire proposal and what those costs would look like.
It's safe to say that you'd have to increase the amount of staff that you have if we were to move in this direction.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think we are looking at maybe an incremental headcount of 3 people. But I think it would be very helpful if we actually have all of these details that we can present to you and then have the conversation when we have provided you with full informed information.
So it's kind of premature for us to make a decision on whether we should license landlords or not.
I believe the matter before you, sir, through you, Mr. Chair, is simply that we are undertaking this body of work. This was a submission through the Tenant Issues Committee to feed into that work that is ongoing, and this absolutely will be the discussion of full debate when we bring the report back.
And when's that going to be?
We have targeted for your next committee meeting, May.
Question of the clerk, procedurally. There's 2 things that I could be doing at this particular time. One is either moving a motion to refer, or sorry, to receive, or there is another term in committee that is often used as well in the way of bringing something back at the appropriate time. Do you recall the term that might be for a motion?
The first I need to...
Yes. As to your first point about a motion to receive, the committee cannot receive this item as it contains a recommendation. So that's number 1. Number 2, I think you're thinking, Councillor Mammoliti, of the motion to take note and file.
Right.
That's the motion I think you
And that
want to
would be
make.
in order in this particular case?
Yes, that would.
Okay. To speak, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we'll go to speakers now. Councilor Mammoliti, and then followed by Councilor Marlowe. Councilor Mammoliti, you have the floor. Please go ahead. I do have, a point of order. I'm sorry about that. Any visiting members of council, I'm sorry, that would like to speak on this item? If not, we'll go to Councilor Mammoliti. Oh, Councilor Perusa, I've been asking. You have the floor, my friend. Go ahead.
on the mic.
Sure. Councilor Perusa.
Is that a banana on your desk?
Anthony, put the mic. No, you've got to press the button yourself.
No.
The yellow button.
Not the white one?
You need to write something.
You're on.
Yeah, so, Mr.
Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I regret I just arrived and didn't get the full gist of the tenor of the discussion that proceeded, but I did briefly catch what Councillor Mammoliti was saying and the direction that Councillor Mammoliti was heading in by way of moving a motion basically to receive this and file it away, never to be seen again. And I think that, quite frankly, that would be the inappropriate course of action. Mr. Chair, let me just recount to some degree on why we are here on this particular issue. Some time ago, you will recall that in a very sort of direct move to create a landlord licensing regime in this city, because we all came to understand that many of our rental housing projects and many of our rental housing building weren't being kept up to a livable standard by any stretch of the imagination. We knew that there were lots and lots of issues, and at that time, we knew that just simply because many of us had taken the time to basically visit many of the rental housing buildings in our own individual wards, in our own individual communities. And after having done that, we saw the level of standard. We saw the conditions with which some of the people in the city were living while they were paying, market rents, and they were paying decent level of money. they weren't getting and they aren't getting the housing that they should be getting for those rents. So we pushed for, when we got here, a landlord licensing system. And quite frankly, we weren't able to achieve that some years ago. But what we did do, and what was very much a landmark moment, was we created a multi-residential audit program. So where did that take us? Well, that took us individually as councillors and as people, from folks who had some first-hand knowledge of some buildings in our own respective wards, to a much broader understanding of the conditions citywide. So what we've had and what we've had created through the audit program is a very, very comprehensive understanding of the rental housing stock within the City of Toronto. You'll probably have heard this morning that our staff have actually gone out and audited thousands of buildings, and they've issued thousands of work orders. So what have all of those audits and those work orders done? They've created a website where each of us can go and see exactly what the state of those buildings is and are, how many of those work orders, how many work orders have been issued in relation to each and every one of those buildings, and how long those work orders have been on those buildings or those properties for. So as you look at that, and then you look at the compliance rate, i.e. the level to which the landlords are responding to those work orders, then you begin to scratch your head and you begin to say, there is a real problem here. We as a city send out teams of inspectors. Just a little addition. I'm not going to ask for extra time or another round, but I would like to wrap up if I may. Sure. So these teams of folks are going out there, and what they're saying is, we don't have the ability to enforce. We'd be taking thousands of landlords to court at enormous cost, legal and otherwise. So therefore, we created this audit program, but now what we need is the managerial tools to see us through this.
Thank you,
to be able to make sure that people are able to bring those standards, those quality in the rental housing stock up to a livable standard. This is the logical next step in that process. I want to thank the staff, and I want to thank Councillor Matlow and everybody else who's finally come on, sort of wrap their heads around this.
Thank you, Councillor Perusa. The next speaker, Councillor Davis. Please go ahead.
Oh, we can control our microphones. Liberated.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I too stand here to speak in favor of the motion that is going to come before us. And the motion that is going to come before us is to refer this back. You will hear from Councillor Matlow, to come up with a name for this program, and I think it's a very good motion to capture what is the intent of what we are doing. And what we're doing at the City of Toronto is, yes, reviewing further the establishment of a licensing regime for high-rise buildings. But it's not about simply for the purpose of licensing. It is about the purpose of defending the public interest. That's what regulations are about. We regulate industry to ensure that we are acting in the interest of our residents, for the well-being of our residents, and to control the industry in order to protect the safety and well-being of our residents. That's what regulating an industry is about. And that's what this next item is all about as well. And in this particular item, we know that the property standards bylaw has its limitations. We can't get at all of the things we need to regulate. And we can't enforce and prosecute through the normal court system in a way that makes landlords pay attention to our property standards. So this new tool, this mechanism of establishing standards for buildings and to provide us extra tools to regulate those buildings is exactly what we need. And I want to thank Helen, who's here again, and the tenant activists who every day are fighting to get decent living standards in this city. Because I can absolutely verify what Helen says. That if you let landlords time after time after time ignore tenants and their requests for building improvements, for getting their kitchens fixed, doors coming off cupboards, mold in bathrooms, all of the kinds of things that you need and want fixed in your apartment. But the other thing that this system will do is it will bring together and coordinate all of the other agencies that regulate buildings. We're going to work with fire. We're going to work with TSSA to make sure elevators work. They're going to have to make sure that they're meeting all of the other requirements, the electrical safety requirements. These are things that will be built into a licensing system. We will make sure that they're recycling. We haven't been able to do that. We can make sure they meet environmental objectives of the City of Toronto as well. These are other public policy objectives we have that we can build into a licensing system. But mostly, it isn't about the system or the structure or the fees. It's about creating safe and decent housing for everyone who pays rent in the City of Toronto.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. The next speaker is Councillor Perks. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll be quick. Councillor Mammoliti in his questions of staff indicated that he felt that perhaps this is, or in his questions of deputants, that this would just increase rents and create a lot of staff time. I actually have some practical experience in my ward about the value and importance of licensing where people live that shows that those assumptions on Councillor Mammoliti's part are wrong. When I first became a councillor almost a decade ago, I had quite a number of unlicensed rooming houses in Ward 14. Over the course of a couple years, I brought those rooming houses into the licensing system. Here's what's happened as a result. Rents have not gone up. The cost to the city has not gone up because we actually recover the costs of licensing and standards staff through our licensing fees. Here's what has happened. Places where you wouldn't want your worst enemy to live, places with moldy windows, places with ceilings falling in, places without proper fire alarms, places without sprinklers, places where fire doors don't open and close properly, places full of bed bugs and cockroaches and mice and rats. These places have been cleaned up and become decent habitations, and guess what? The length of tenure, in other words, how long tenants are able to live in a place, has improved. We've stabilized housing in my ward through that process for over 1,000 individuals without having extra costs to the city, without rents going up. Councillor Mammoliti's argument through his questions is wrong. You should not support his motion to note and file. You should make sure that everyone who's living in Toronto is guaranteed a decent place to live when they pay rent. It's a very simple and straightforward question. I urge you to support the recommendations that come from the Tenant Issues Committee. I congratulate the work of staff, Councillor Matlow, and all the other members of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perks. Any other visiting member of council? Councillor Nuciara, you're next. Please go ahead. 5 minutes.
Do I have to stand?
No.
Oh, okay.
I can see you. Councillor Nuciara, I can see you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, I know, you thought I was standing. No, I'm sorry I came in late on this topic, but I do support the staff recommendation, and I'm actually quite surprised that we're even debating it, because we asked for this years ago, and when I was on licensing committee, and we asked for that, and I know that that there were some members of council that we had public meetings throughout the city on the audits, and I can't remember who was on that committee, and we went to North York, we went to all the civic center, we heard from residents, from tenants, and how they felt it was very important that we do license landlords. And, you know, I've had a bad experience in my ward, and I'm sure all members of council have, where we have slum landlords, and they won't do absolutely nothing. And we get calls from tenants and pleading with us for the city to help them send MLS out to lay charges, and it's just an ongoing problem, I believe, throughout the city. And I think by licensing, I think that would bring a lot of the landlords in some of these buildings that are really run down. At least we'll be able to regulate and we'll be able to enforce it. But we have Toronto housing buildings as well that are in bad shape, so they should fall. I mean, I think they should fall into the same category as well, because it's not just the private landlords that we're having problems with. We're having problems with Toronto housing as well, and they shouldn't be treated any differently, in my opinion. But absolutely support the recommendations that we have before us. We've been waiting years for this, and I know I've been advocating, and other members of council, so please support it. And I don't know if there's a motion not to, but if there is, please don't support the motion if not to support these recommendations. You know, I have to excuse my eye. I did not get into a fight. I just hit the door.
Thank you, Councilor Anunciada.
To a fight with one of the members of council. You should see the other member of council.
Thank you, Councilor Anunciada. Any other visiting member of council that would like to speak on this item? And if not, we'll get to members of the committee. Councilman Molina, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move this item back to staff. It's what they want. It's what they're saying, suggesting, and they come forward within a month with their suggestions, of which I think will include the costs associated to this, how many more staff they're looking for, and allow me the opportunity later to ask those questions. So I'm going to move that. I would move a note and file, but I heard from the clerk that if I moved the note and file, that in fact it would go back to council immediately, and I don't think we're ready for that. So I'm not going to do that. I would vote against this completely, because I don't support increasing rents to tenants through guideline increases, and that's exactly what the councillors on this floor are suggesting that we do by implementing something like this. And here's how you do it. And by the way, it's amazing how a couple of comments that one councillor perhaps makes brings in a flow of other councillors and tries to perhaps take over the agenda at a committee. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that they've come, because I get to tell them firsthand that what they're doing is wrong. And they'll hear it later. They'll hear it later when their tenants complain that their landlord, after this is through, and perhaps even after the city or the province, for that matter, might be through with them, the increase to their rents would be not $10, as you've heard here today. I believe that you're talking within hundreds of dollars per tenant if we start doing these sorts of things. Now, I'm a tenant advocate just like all of you are. And that's why I stand in my place today and say to you that I'm doing the right thing for tenants by saying no to this. Because at the end of the day, it is the province that is responsible for doing everything that we're suggesting. And all the arguments that are brought forward today only help my particular argument. You're suggesting that services aren't being provided to tenants. You're suggesting that there's mold and mildew and all the things that are associated to perhaps the bad landlords and not taking care of their properties. You're suggesting everything from rats to mice to all of the railing issues, everything that we've got as an issue is not the responsibility of a municipal government. It's the responsibility of the province. And all you're doing with this is increasing our bureaucracy, bloating up a budget that we can't afford, and trying to make yourselves accountable, perhaps, to the local voices, because I know they're there, I get them too. But you know what I do? Unlike some of you, I tell them to go see their MPP because their MPP is sitting on their butt, not listening to them and not dealing with their issues. And in this particular case, that's what everybody should be doing, because it's the MPP's political responsibility to deal with these particular calls. They have the money, they have the legislation, they've got the inspectors at their fingertips, and they could do everything that all of you want to do at a provincial level. I don't know where you're going to get this money. We only get 8 cents on the dollar to run the City of Toronto. That's all we get. And every time somebody takes on a health-related matter or something that hits this floor, it costs us money we don't have. So Councillor Nunziata and Councillor Perruzza, I get where you're coming from. I understand it. But if you put more pressure on the province, let them deal with it. They've got the ability to, if we as a city demand it. Mr. Chairman, you would not have let me move a motion to become our own province, would you? Because at the end of the day, that's what's needed. Toronto needs to be its own province because we're taking on all the issues the provincial governments take on. And what's wrong with that? You want to move in that particular direction? Maybe that's something we should all be rallying around and turning this chamber into a provincial chamber, not a municipal one. Because you're wanting to do all the job that a provincial government is doing. Our bureaucracy wants to do the job that a provincial bureaucracy wants to do. Let's stick to the basics in municipalities. Let's fix our roads. Let's cut the grass. Let's make sure we get to people that are driving illegally with our bylaw enforcement officers. Let's do the things that municipalities should be doing and not the provincial government. And I say this, I can't say it any more clearer. I think we're making a mistake by looking at this. Refer it off to staff. Let's look at it.
Thank you,
and it gives me an opportunity to come back to you and even move a motion that turns us into a province and not a city.
You understand that they got thousands of work orders they can't do.
Mr. Chair,
the next speaker.
I have a point of order, I think.
I have a point of order from Councillor de Vermaker. Your point of order, please.
I'm just wondering if the clerks can show us the motion on the screen, because I think that is Councillor Mammoliti, and I might be very happy to support his motion. Okay.
Councillor Mammoliti, he did move the motion at the beginning. I was paying close attention to it.
Oh, yes. So my question on point of order, isn't Councillor Mammoliti's motion the same as what's in the report? Because the report before says we're referring this to come back in May, and Councillor Mammoliti's motion is saying
I do have another.
Back in May.
Mine with a fiscal explanation as well.
I have another recommendation from another speaker as well, and I will do my ruling is at the proper time. The next speaker is Councillor de Vermaker.
No, it's
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Point of order?
I believe I'm next on the list.
I'm sorry yeah. We have the next speaker is Councillor Malo. Please go ahead.
So I move the following amendment to Councillor Mammoliti's motion, simply the naming issue, because it was brought to my attention by city staff that the term rent safe that we've been using as a working title, there are issues with it. I believe that there's another entity that uses it, so we just need to send it back to staff to deal with that specific issue. What you heard from one of the members today was, in my opinion, absurd. And didn't reflect the reality, at least as I understand it. Anyone who has been around here for a while should know that the City of Toronto, in fact, does deal with property standards issues. It would be negligent to just say, go talk to your MPP if you have a property standard issue and you're a tenant. That's our responsibility. That's what we're paid to do. That's what we should be doing. We have a responsibility to support tenants. Also, under the RTA, under the Act, a landlord cannot pass on the cost of a cost recovery fee like what is being proposed through above the guideline rent increase. So in other words, the fear-mongering that I just heard, I don't believe has any basis in truth, in reality. And I know that in this place, people often get up and sort of, I want to be the champion of this or the this or that.
Councilman Maliri, your point of order is?
Pause my time, please.
I'd ask the chair to just concentrate on the language being used by the speaker. He spent much of his time bashing another member of council instead of his arguments. If that's in order, then I'd ask you and the speaker in the future to not cut me off when I'm prepared to do the same thing in this chair.
Councilman Maliri, that's not a point of order, it's a point of privilege. I just want to remind members of council that in terms of a point of orders, your point has to reflect an error in procedure or a breach on the rules, and that's not exactly what happened. Your point of privilege is well taken, Council. Thank you. Please continue.
As I was saying, Mr. Chair, only certain capital repairs can be passed on through an above the guideline rent increase. A fee like this cannot. So that being said, though, ironically, Councillor Mammoliti's motion was something that I had already drafted. I'm just adding on the second line to my motion, because I agree that this should go to the executive director to come back with a fulsome report. Not one of you, including myself, should vote on whether or not we're moving forward with this initiative or not without all the facts in front of us. So in fact, you heard a lot of speeches today about something that actually hasn't even been fully proposed with all the information in front of us. What I do know is this. We created a Tenants Issues Committee to bring forward initiatives to support the interests of tenants. We are both bringing new ideas forward, but also building on the good work that's come before us. There are many tenant advocates across this council, no matter one's ideology or geography. 50% of our residents are renters. And what I do know to be true, based on what I actively hear, is that so many tenants live in buildings, and I don't mean there are many good apples and many good landlords, but so many tenants live in buildings that are in disrepair, where landlords are willfully negligent to their interests, to their concerns, who know that we don't have the tools as of yet to be able to truly enforce the property standards that we expect. And as you can see in the item that is going to staff, we even suggest that landlords be prohibited if they don't fulfill the requirements of the license to apply for an Aggie, an above the guideline rent increase, to lease a vacant unit. And we're looking for other options too. What we do know is this. We need more tools to be able to respect and protect tenants in the city. And to not focus on the good landlords, but to focus on the bad apples who treat their buildings more like just like businesses and forgetting that they're homes. These are places where seniors to young families to everybody in between live. These are our residents. These are the people who we serve. And all I'm asking for is an opportunity to go to staff, and they'll come back with the details. And I can see that there's going to be a unanimous vote today. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Marlowe. The next speaker is Councillor De Vermaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I too hope that we will have a unanimous or near unanimous support for this motion to go forward today. And I hope when it comes back to us and it comes to council in a month from now, thank goodness, that we will also support this initiative. Councillor Nunziata mentioned earlier that she and I and others years ago on the licensing committee asked for this type of initiative to happen, and it's taken a long time to get here. I think Councillor Howard Moscow many years ago also fought for a program like this and wasn't able to do it on his tenure of council, but it's here at last. I think it's going to be very good. It's going to be very positive. It will actually reward good landlords. And there are many good landlords who have excellent buildings where people move into them and they rent and they never leave. They're there for 10, 20, 30 years because it's a good building and they're happy where they are. So if you're a good landlord, you have nothing to fear. In fact, this is going to help you recruit tenants, because when this system becomes public and people are going to go and look for a rental unit, or their relatives are coming from Germany or South Africa or Japan, and they say, you know, I'm going to help my friend find an apartment in the city of Toronto, there'll be a ranking system, just like the restaurants have, so that we know that the places that we send our family members and our friends are good. So every good landlord will actually get more clients and more customers. A landlord that is obeying the law, being disrespectful of the tenants, disrespectful of our inspectors, disrespectful of our bylaws, will actually be named. We will name names, and that's a good thing. And let the market give a signal to that landlord that when you go to rent an apartment and you look up on the internet that you were going to rent an apartment unit on somewhere on Lawrence Avenue, and you find out that that's a building that has a long list of violations and problems and isn't passing the test, then yes, you're going to walk across the street onto the south side of Lawrence and rent from a building that is a good landlord. So I think it protects the public, it protects the city, it protects good landlords, and we should bring it back, and I encourage staff to bring this back as quickly as possible in May with some very strong regulations on a cost recovery basis to protect the people, 50% of the people that live in this city. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor de Vermeerker. Any other speakers? If not, we have two motions. Councillor Mamoliri's motion, which being amended by Councillor Madlos. So So we have the first motion before us from Councillor Madlo, and Councillor Madlo's motion amends Councillor Mamoliri's. I'm going to ask for a recorded vote on this one. On the amendment, all those in favor? Councillor de Vermeerker, Di Giorgio, and Madlo, Carijanes, Palacio. Against? Councillor Mamoliri. On the item as amended, all those in favor? Councillor de Vermeerker, Mamoliri, Di Giorgio, Madlo, Carijanes, Palacio. Unanimous. Thank you. So now we are going back now to the main item, number 3. But before we get to that one, there is one pending item that it needs to be introduced, and that's from Councillor Madlo, and I hope that members of the committee have an opportunity to read his communication that was circulated a bit earlier. So that item has to be introduced. I'm looking for it, but it's somewhere. So it's we need to introduce Councillor Madlo's communication. All those in favor? Against? Carried. So that item is added onto the agenda. It's a quick item? Okay, let's deal with that in terms of cleaning up. I do have my communication that it was before you as well, and that was adopted by the committee as item number 4. And I'm going to move the adoption of these recommendations. In essence, it's going to city staff. All those in favor? We are dealing with the chair's communication. Yeah.
I just want to clarify the vote on number 2. Because we referred it, we don't need to adopt as amended, because you just said that, the second vote that we took. So just clarify the vote on number 2 is to refer back to the executive committee, right? So you just want to announce that.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to take a vote on as amended.
Yeah, okay. So before we move to item number 4, just I've been advised by the clerk that on item number 2 we adopted recommendation. We actually refer the items to city staff so it's not the item as amended. So it's just for clarification purpose, for record keeping. Okay, thank you. So we go back now to item number 4. That was from the chairs. So it's on this item, I would like to refer this to city staff. All those in favor? Against? Carry. Thank you. Now we have Councilor Malo's recommendation. Councilor Malo. It was introduced already.
Yeah.
And we voted on it.
So I'll very briefly just explain what this is. There's a policy that allows city staff to permit a right of entry, a permit to, let's say, a resident who, for example, is doing repairs. They have to be able to access their neighbor's property, be able to do those repairs on their property. But let's say there's a relationship that's gone sour, their neighbor doesn't allow them. So under certain circumstances, they're permitted this permit to be able to go onto their property to do it. That being said, though, there is some confusion amongst residents about will this actually give them the right to be able to go onto their neighbor's property without them calling the police and trying to get them charged for trespassing? What does that mean? And the other thing is, it puts a lot of strain and burden on staff to decide when they will support this permit and when they won't. Their practice has been when there's a clear health and safety issue. That being said, though, that comes across as subjective to many residents because many residents, almost every resident, will feel like there's a health issue, for example, if there's an exposed part of their property, rain is getting in, etc. So this is actually something that I've worked on with staff to simply just get some clarity about this this right that the city has and this permit that we're allowed to provide, and really when it's provided, when it's not, what the rules should be. Should we have this in the first place? Should we not? And staff obviously are very supportive of this because there are many residents who are always asking for this, and there's just confusion between the public and us collectively as to when it's appropriate to provide this permit and when it's not. I hope I provided you at least a synopsis of what this is about, but really what this is we'll get more information back and then we'll make a decision.
Thank you, Councilor Malo. Speakers and Councilor Mamoliti.
Of staff.
Or you have questions? Okay. Questions to staff. Councilor Mamoliti.
Legislation that the province passes, does it not have a 24-hour notice given to tenants if the landlord needs to be in there for any reasons outside of emergencies?
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct that the Residential Tenancies Act does have a 24-hour notice period. This is not...
What are we trying to do with this then?
Yeah, this recommendation, I understand, is to look into the City of Toronto's right of entry permit process for a neighbor to enter onto the lands of an adjoining owner, not into a dwelling.
I think he's trying to get to that.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yeah, it's a separate bylaw, separate from tenant and landlord issues, sir. It relates to people applying to the city when they need to enter onto their neighbor's property to complete maintenance work on their home. It's ostensibly the city granting a right of trespass, and we end up in very difficult positions when we're arbitrating or mediating between two neighbors that are not getting along. I think we've identified through the years of this being in place some challenges. Certainly we've had some recently that Councillor Matlow is aware of, and I think it's worth having a discussion about our role in respect to granting trespass.
So a bylaw can actually grant trespass to staff or the adjoining neighbor. Is that what we're trying to do here? Allow the neighbor to come onto your property whenever they feel like they need to because they're planting something, or?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, the current right of entry bylaw in force today authorizes the adjoining landowner to apply for a permit for entry to carry out repairs and alterations to structures and fences on their property. So it does authorize a neighbor to apply.
This goes beyond what's there already.
No, sir, I don't understand the request to be that. The bylaw as it stands does authorize a person to apply today to do this entry.
Right, so why do we need this? Is this for the Matlow householder? What do we need this for?
So through you, Mr. Chair, since I've been here the 4 years, sir, there has been a number of challenges with the application of this bylaw because it does put the city directly in the middle of what are essentially neighbor disputes. There are rights inferred through this bylaw, so we're trying to look at it. And
in fact, this will allow the city to venture onto someone's property with very little notice or no notice at all.
No, sir. Through you, Mr. Chair, the bylaw as it exists allows a homeowner to apply to the city to get a right of entry onto their neighbor's property for the purposes of doing home renovations or et cetera. Okay. So there are challenges with the bylaw.
I'll speak against it.
It's worth us looking at the bylaw.
Thank you.
Not granting access.
Councillor Di Giorgio, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you sit on this committee?
Does this,
So when are you
can
going
we
to leave?
stop? Can we stop,
When are you
guys?
going to leave so that we can do our job?
Does the proposed, amendment to the bylaw
please.
incorporate or capture situations that I've run into where someone is seeking to build a new home and there are conditions, let's say either imposed by committee of adjustment or what have you, where it's almost impossible to build the new home unless someone encroaches on the adjacent property owner? Will this address that issue?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the right of entry permit process as it currently exists does not capture new construction. What this request is for us to look at the rights or the bylaw as it exists currently, which is granting homeowners access to their neighbor's property in certain conditions that the city is in the middle of mediating and arbitrating and laying out conditions and collecting deposits to permit that trespass. This is simply saying, I think we need to look at the bylaw, we need to look at the city's role in respect to these types of transactions.
I understand that, but what I'm asking is, will the bylaw address new construction, or is there an alternative that people seeking new construction have to follow?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the city's authority is to only allow permits for entry for repairs and alterations, and therefore completely new construction would not be the subject of this bylaw.
Okay, but what does someone having to build a new home, what process must they go through to actually gain access? Or is it just denied?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are mechanisms for homeowners to seek access onto their neighbors' properties. Obviously, through consent is the most obvious way, through civil or court remedies as well.
All right, so courts are the only option. Thank you.
Councillor Marlowe.
Through Mr. Chair, to the Executive Director of Municipal Licensing and Standards. If one were to create a political narrative that this was somehow a motion that changes anything or introduces any new rights or abilities or anything, would that be true or false?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the motion is asking us to review the bylaw. It's not pointing to any addition or deletion or action to be taken other than to review and report back.
And to be clear, is this something that you and your staff are quite happy to do because it may actually help you with your capacity and resources?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, we'll go to speakers now. Councilmember Leary.
So what I heard is that this really doesn't change anything, that the Councillor Matlow is asking to review the bylaw, and I can only assume that based on what's happening at City Hall wants to be able to now extend its ability to enter anybody's property whenever they want. Now, with a review of it.
I'll stop your time. Point of privilege, Councillor Marlowe.
My point of privilege is that under our procedural bylaws, I believe that the member, by saying that City Hall, that means every single one who works here, wants to do something that we are factually not doing due to this motion, it seeks to embarrass the reputation, impugn the reputation of us all. And I'm not asking for the member to do anything because I don't believe he'll do it. But I wanted to state that point.
Point is taken. Thank you.
So I don't know what point he's trying to make, except
Councilman,
review the policy.
Councilman, please go ahead.
Review the policy to allow City Hall to be able to do more on private property. To review because that's what's going to come out of this. I assure you of it after 27 years in this chair, Mr. Chairman. The recommendations are going to be frightening, they're going to be scary, and every single homeowner in this city needs to take note of what's happening. Because right now, there is a process. Right now, if a neighbor wants to enter another neighbor's property, they got to go through a process, which could include a judge, a legal kind of form. What they're looking at doing here now is changing that to adopt a bylaw to enable your neighbor to be able to come onto your property really whenever they want. And if it's not your neighbor, it will be the City of Toronto and government. This is scary. And I can't support it because I think I know what's going on here. Not perhaps on the staff side. I think the staff they're always willing to look at bylaws, and they're always willing to look at improving bylaws. But I think there's a political motive here that we all should be worried about.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. Here's the point of order.
Councilor Perusa is, I'm sorry, you are not a member of the committee. Thank you.
Oh, I can't do a point of order?
You've been here for many years. You know the rules. Thank you, Councilor Perusa.
I apologize for that.
Councilor Molina, you have another 15 seconds. Please go ahead.
15 seconds? I'm absolutely appalled at what's going on, and I would encourage every single homeowner in this city to take note of what some politicians are trying to do here. Your particular privacy is at jeopardy with anything that pertains to the arguments coming forward.
Point of privilege.
I'm so sorry. I don't typically do this, but I don't want. I'm sorry. I don't typically do this, but again, I believe that the reputation of this institution is impugned when there is a false and I believe malicious suggestion that there is something untowards about this motion. Just read the motion. I'm just asking anyone who's voting here today, rather than come up with all sorts of
debate,
big things, just read the motion.
Councilor Malo, it's on your point of privilege, you're insinuating that your rights have been impugned and the rights of the Assembly, the committee, and members of council as a whole. I was paying close attention to the remarks of Councilman Moliri, and I believe that that he heard loud and clear from the beginning that just to be a little bit kinder to each other in terms of our remarks. Thank you. Any other speakers? If not, now we have the communication from Councilor Malo. Okay, all those in favor? Recorded vote, Councilor Di Giorgio, Councilor Di Veramaker, Palacio, Malo. Against, Councilor Mamoliri, Councilor Carigianis. It carries. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now we go to the main item, but before we start, just to remind everyone, in terms of some of the procedural changes that we made this morning in terms of speaking time. Members of the public will be able to speak up to 5 minutes. Questions to speakers, including visiting members of council and members of the committee, will be able to ask questions up to 3 minutes. Thank you, and now we'll get to the list. I'll be calling batches of 5, including the numbers of the speakers. And the first speaker is Luke Anderson, followed by Julie St. Louis, Amardeep Singh, Larry Labovich, and Paul Sexton. Once again, Luke Anderson, Julie St. Louis, Amardeep Singh, Larry Labovich, and Paul Sehon. And the first speaker is Luke Anderson.
If you can move just, I think that it can work, right?
Can't. It's gonna be tricky. I think you might reach the speaker. Do you want to just put my notes up on the desk there? Put them? Sure. Is she okay? Yeah. Sorry. Good. You okay? Yeah. Can everybody hear me?
Are we ready? Good morning, Mr. Anderson.
Good morning, thanks.
Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Maybe the next meeting we'll talk about accessibility in City Hall because accessible podium would be amazing. Anyway, thanks for allowing me to speak today. My name's Luke Anderson. I'm Executive Director of the Stopgap Foundation, and I live here in downtown Toronto. It's no secret that people with accessibility needs have historically faced a variety of problems accessing on-demand transportation in Toronto. And while there's always more that can be done to help everyone get around our city, it's important to highlight that over recent months, there's been a genuine effort from both traditional taxi and ride-sharing companies like Uber to improve accessible transportation in Toronto. This positive movement has come both with improvements made to wheelchair-accessible taxis and the introduction of Uber Wave. Ride-sharing company Uber's wheelchair-accessible vehicle service. In the past, for example, there was a flat fee charged for service by traditional taxi cab companies. Now, neither services have a flat fee, and instead, fares are more or less on par with regular cab fares. What was once a $60 cab ride has now been reduced to an equitable $15. There has also been a huge improvement on wait times. A year ago, it was not uncommon to wait for an hour for a wheelchair accessible vehicle. Now both come on demand. Taxi in around 20 minutes, and Uber Wave with an average ETA of under 7 minutes, with both actively working to bring wait times down even further. It seems as though this positive progress may be coming as a result of healthy competition in the marketplace, and the addition of companies like Uber have undoubtedly helped drive this positive change. A newcomer to the market, Uber has made a commitment to improve accessible transit in our city and is proving itself as yet another option that is helping increase the mobility and freedom of people with disabilities. All Torontonians deserve access to transportation in our city, and it is clear that we are making strides towards that becoming a reality. Toronto City Council, as part of your ongoing efforts to making our city more accessible for everyone, please continue to make progress with Uber on new rules and regulations that are fair and equitable. With services like Uber Wave, companies like Uber have shown that they are very much a part of the fabric of our city and that there is room for everyone to innovate as we work together to improve accessible transit options. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We have some questions for you, and these three members of council. The first one is Councillor Davis. Please go ahead, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you very much for coming and speaking, and there's no doubt that we needed to see improvements in accessible ground transportation in Toronto. I just wanted to ask you if you think, though, that Uber or all transportation providers, ground transportation providers, ought to meet certain safety standards.
100%.
So right now in the taxi industry, there's a requirement for snow tires, training, that they have to have, in fact, first aid training. They have to have lights that flash, like there are security cameras. Do you think that all transportation sector participants, vehicles for hire, should have those requirements?
I do. I think, again, speaking to my comment about fair and equitable service, I think getting everybody on the same playing field is an important process in developing the policy that we're working on today.
Great. So one of the other requirements for every taxi driver, they actually have to register with an HST number to show that they're actually paying HST. Do you think that all vehicle for hire providers should also do that?
I do, yep, I do. And I know that my expertise comes with my own lived experience. So so continue. I will answer your questions to the best of my ability, but I may have to defer the question to somebody else that has a more experience around or knowledge around the question.
And right now, there are inspections that are done of the city by the city. That is a comprehensive inspection of, I don't know, 135 points or something, and the proposal is to lower the standard to something called an NTO safety check. And I'm wondering if you think that we ought to be considering the highest standard of safety inspections for all vehicles in this industry.
I think that's a fair thing to be looking into when we're coming up with policy. Yeah.
And finally, is commercial insurance. Right now, commercial insurance is required because this driving a taxi or a vehicle, limousine or whatever in the city of Toronto for hire, it's a business, requires commercial insurance. Do you think that should be a requirement as well if you're going to be driving in the city of Toronto? You may not know the differences, so I understand.
I think safety is paramount in this conversation. We want to make sure that everyone is
okay, that was your last question.
protected and safe.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Burnside, you're next.
Thank you.
3 minutes.
And sorry, I just walked in. But you're not an expert on HST and safety and roof lights, are you?
I'm not.
You're here because you're concerned about the service provided to you in the city, whether it's by taxis or other means, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Perusa, 3 minutes.
Just to try to get a better understanding. So if somebody comes into this situation and says, creates a business and a business model where they're just simply going to, hire kind of like a part-time folks, putting up their own cars, putting up their own insurance, putting up their own wear and tear, putting up all of their stuff to provide this thing and to move people around. How can the taxi industry ever compete with that?
Well, I think I'm going to have someone else answer that question.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. So if nobody really in an organized way can compete with that, would you permit that activity to basically wipe out call it the taxi industry, I don't know, call it the limousine industry, call it, the industry that basically, in a systematic way, provides that service for people. Would you allow that to happen?
No, I wouldn't. So I think what we're working on today is policy that is fair and equitable, right across the board.
Would you agree that in every activity there is a saturation point beyond which nobody then can make a living any longer? I mean, there's only so many people who are going to be seeking rides in the city at any given time. And if you have just simply too many people out there providing the same service, at some point no one can make a living at it anymore. Wouldn't you agree? I understand you as a consumer, you want somebody to show up within 7 minutes to your door. I get that. And me too. I like convenience and I like, fast service and all of that stuff. But wouldn't you agree that at some point you're not going to get that anymore because nobody would be willing to provide it because nobody can make a living at it?
Well, there's a huge underserved market for people with disabilities right now, and that was my intention. My intention was to share my lived experience about not having service. And until 2 months ago, I was waiting over an hour. In fact, I've had to book a ride 24 hours ahead of time. That's been the history. That doesn't exist anymore because of this amazing new technology that exists, and that's an important thing to share today. There's room for a market that is competitive, and it's created a lot of really great change so far, and we need to figure out a way to keep it here. That's my position.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any other questions? Councilor Carichanes, I just want to bring to the attention of the committee, I'm going to allow 3 speakers to deal with them before lunch. Is for accommodation purposes. So after Mr. Anderson, I'll be calling the next speakers. That's number 25, 65, and 66. They'll be the next speakers, and let's be mindful that we have to deal for accommodation purpose with the public speakers before lunch. So, Councilor Carichanes.
Thank you, and thank you for coming to speak today and to present your views. Would you agree that we need to have a level playing field? What is good for one company should be good for another company?
I do, yep.
Okay. Would you agree that when you are on the road, you got to share the sidewalk with people that are walking, although, you face, people on the road should be courteous to you and you should be courteous to them. Like when you're walking on the sidewalk, rules apply to both the wheelchair and somebody walking together.
Yeah, I do,
okay.
Of course.
Therefore, would you want one company to have a heads up over another company? Like somebody should be treated a little bit more better than others.
Someone should be treated...
Well, should somebody be treated different than others, or should be people treated the same regardless of who they are?
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me give you some, I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to read the report, but the report states that vehicles that are Uber vehicles should have once a year checkup, and taxis should have 2 years, every 2 years, twice a year checkup by city staff, and the others can go to any back lane and be checked. Where would you feel more comfortable in riding? Somebody that has twice a year checked by the city, or somebody that gets checked once a year in a back lane somewhere?
Well, do I need to answer that question?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you do. Yes, you do.
It's pretty...
The point is, it's all about safety here. Would you feel safer in something that is checked by a city mechanic twice a year?
Mr. Anderson,
checked by another mechanic
the
once a year?
question has been asked. You are free to answer if you will.
Point of order, Chair.
You don't have to answer.
Order. Can I have Councilor Matlow back in his seat, not leading the witness, please?
Councilor Carichanes, please. Let me run the meeting.
What I'd like, again, just what I'd like to,
my question
I'm
is
coming
very
back
simple,
to my
sir.
point about fair and equitable service, and we just have to come upon policy that respects everybody's business here, right? That's what we're working towards.
True enough, sir, but would you feel safer in a vehicle checked twice a year by city staff, or would you feel safer in a vehicle checked once a year in a back alley by somebody that just signs off?
I am unaware of the city's review process. I would imagine that vehicles are not
Would you feel safer
inspected
knowing-
in a back
Thank you.
alley.
You have answered the question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Point of order.
Thank you.
Point of order, and Councilor Marlowe.
Privilege, rather. Mr. Chair, would you just clarify for the audience of the public that this isn't a court of law or even a quasi-judicial process? They're not witnesses. They don't have to answer a question if they choose not to. This is simply for information sharing.
Is that a point of order, point of privilege?
Thank you, Mr. Marlowe. I think that I made it quite clear from the beginning, but just for clarification purposes, and this applies to visiting members of council, members of the committee, and members of the public. Please refrain from being personal. I understand that you may have very strong views on the recommendations that are before us. You may not like the answer, but let's be a little bit kinder to each other, and let's pay close attention to what people are saying. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah.
Questions, and once again, please try to be brief. As I mentioned,
Very brief.
we do have 3 members of the public that need to be accommodated before lunch. Councilman Muliri, please go ahead.
So I think the deputant's not aware that,
Is Mr. Anderson, if you don't mind, please to come back. Please to come back. You have a couple more questions from members of the committee.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll reset your time. Councilor Mamuliri, please.
Yeah, if you're not comfortable in answering any of the questions, please don't feel like you have to, okay?
Okay.
I'm trying to get a sense of why anybody who's using the Lyft service believes that UberX can do a better job than the city's well-inspected Lyft program with the taxi industry.
So I'm not going to speak about UberX. I'm sharing my experience with Uber's Uber Wave service. Yeah.
You're well aware that that service has the taxis typically coming to your door for that service, right?
UberX?
No, Uber.
Uber Wave. Uber Wave does come to wherever you choose.
So it's in fact a service that the city has control over. It's UberX that we don't have control over, and that's the issue here. Are you aware of that at all?
I'm aware, but I'm again sharing my lived experience with.
Have you shared a lived experience with UberX?
I have not experienced UberX. UberX drivers do not have wheelchair accessible vehicles.
Okay, but you get that
Uber Wave service.
That's really why we're here, right? Is because the issue isn't so much about Uber, it's about UberX.
What we're here to talk about is a lack of accessible transportation in this. This is a big item that needs to be addressed in the city because we're working towards a fair and equitable service, transit options for everybody.
Would you be at all surprised that this report really doesn't deal with accessibility issues with UberX?
Please, let's not try to be repetitive with the questions. He answered the answer.
No, I'm just asking because this is UberX. The recommendations don't necessarily deal with accessibility issues around UberX.
The policy that we're working towards?
We're not making any real solid recommendations with respect to a Lyft program with the UberX issue.
Specifically, no. With the UberX issue, no. Okay. But Uber in general.
Okay. And I assume that you live in the city of Toronto?
I do, yep.
Okay, so you've used both?
Sorry, both of which? Both of what?
Taxi services.
I have used both, yeah.
And would you agree with me that if UberX was in a position to have to pay the same sorts of fees around safety issues, the same kinds of fees that the taxi industry has burdened on them by the City of Toronto. Would you agree that that 7 minutes that UberX might be giving you or Uber might be giving you might actually turn into 15 if they had all the overhead that everybody else has?
Well, 15 is better than 24 hours.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Di Bramica.
Great, thank you. Through Mr. Chair, I have questions as well, and I don't know if it's just because you're the first speaker or because you're talking about accessible.
Lay it on me, team.
So thank you very much for coming out today. And I'm wondering if you're aware that over the last 2 years, the city's issued about 500 new license plates for accessible vehicles. So are you aware that one of the reasons you're probably getting better service today isn't because of service A or service B, it's just that there's 500 more vehicles that can accommodate somebody who needs access in a wheelchair. Were you just aware of that?
Yep.
So, you know, for the Pan Am Games, we issued 290 additional licenses and vehicles to help people get around the city, and we've let them stay. So that's, you'd agree with me, that's a good thing.
It's a big improvement.
Yeah, that, I was going to say, it's a huge improvement. So you're happy if the city provides the city and the different communities with more accessible vehicles?
Absolutely.
Because that's going to really make it how fast they get to your house, because if there's more, you'll get faster service.
Yeah, an accessible vehicle is a vehicle that everyone can use regardless of ability.
Yes, and then we have a recommendation before us, number 9. I'm just going to read it to you to just get your thoughts, because I think it would affect you directly. City Council direct the staff to report back on a strategy to collect funds from all non-accessible vehicles to provide incentives to increase the number of on-demand meter accessible taxi cabs available to the public. So our staff have one recommendation to us that says we should add on a little fee to all taxi trips to assist people with accessible vehicles. Do you support that direction of that, or the direction of that recommendation?
So the extra, I'm not aware of that. The extra fee would be attached to an accessible ride? Is that what you're saying?
We would charge, if you will, a small fee on all rides and create, say, on non-accessible rides, and that fund would then go to help subsidize the delivery of a service for on-demand accessible vehicles. So that would make it easier for people to service the community that needs an accessible cab.
Right, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you.
Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to allow 3 speakers that for accommodation purpose to move forward. And the first one is number 25, Peter Astanastopoulos, Senior Manager of Public Policy and Government Relations with the Spinal Cord Injury of Ontario.
Hello, everyone.
The floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Spinal Cord Injury Ontario is an expert in serving people with physical disabilities, and we have been for the last 70 years. We do not claim to be an expert around ground transportation services, nor on how to build the perfect vehicle for hire industry. I just wanted to make that disclaimer first, but we are here to share our experiences around, similar to Luke, with respect to creating fair and equitable services in the City of Toronto. And I think I want to start by saying today's discussion shouldn't be about traditional taxis versus Uber. Today's discussion should be about how we're going to build the best vehicle for hire industry in the City of Toronto that is equitable for everyone. And I don't feel in the questioning that I've heard thus far that that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about this versus that. And I really hope that we can change our discussion today around what's best for the City of Toronto, because from the first deputation, I'm not feeling like I'm hearing that. So I just wanted to come out and say that right away. I believe that the city staff have worked really hard to look at a new way of doing business and a new way of thinking about how to create fair and equitable services for everyone. But I think it's important for us to recognize that nobody has done this so far, and we're all trying to figure out best ways to do that. And I don't think we've landed on the perfect way to do it in these proposed regulations. However, I think it's a good start, and my recommendation to the city today is to build stronger safeguards in ensuring what is being proposed or what gets approved on May 2nd has the opportunity to be adjusted and innovated so we can see how the industry responds to some of the innovations that are happening, and we can ensure that if anything is happening that is questionable to what we believe should be happening in the vehicle for hire transportation can be changed and innovative. So I put a recommendation forward to this committee to build a safeguard system, build a working group after May 2nd, include the disability organizations and include the representatives that are experts in the industry, because I don't believe all of you are experts in transportation industry either. So I think this recommendation needs to be put forward and to ensure that we are growing what is being happening after May 2nd. And I also want to make a comment around the vehicle, the fund that has been proposed by the city. I want to make sure all that goes towards subsidizing the drivers for wheelchair accessible vehicles, because these vehicles are more expensive than the sedan vehicles, and they should have the right to be subsidized to be able to be on an equal playing field with those that are driving sedan vehicles as well. So I'd like a working group to be struck, not an advisory committee, a working group to be struck in order for us to ensure that these dollars are properly spent if this motion is approved. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Questions, visiting members, Councillor Davis. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
I'm over here. Thank you again for coming, because of course we all want to see improved access, and the last round of reforms increased the number of accessible taxis and created TTL, and there are recommendations for expanding those. But I do want to return, if I could, to 2 lines of questioning. One has to do with the safety requirements that currently apply. Do you think that those safety requirements like training and snow tires and security cameras and visible signage and proper insurance and all of that should apply to all vehicles?
Absolutely, it should apply to all vehicles.
Okay.
And do I feel like there's some innovations in the proposed recommendations that need to happen? Absolutely. But sure, I think it's a growing process to figure out what the best way to build these safety measures are as the industry grows.
And that all drivers should have the same criminal record check and done through Toronto Police Service and submitted to the city?
I think we're used to a traditional way of doing business, and that we're innovating right now and we're brainstorming ways to build new things. Absolutely, I feel that those things are necessary, but do I feel like we have figured that out yet? I think we're still figuring that out.
But they should apply fairly.
They absolutely should apply. The city should be mandating safety 100% no matter what on any condition. That's what you guys are here for and accountable for to the residents here in Toronto.
So I want to understand Uber. Uber is now subsidizing the actual service that's being provided, the accessible service now.
Yes.
So do you know how much Uber has not registered here? I don't think we're going to be able to ask Uber questions, which is very unfortunate, unless they're registering by 10:30. I guess they haven't.
What's your question?
Do you know how much they're subsidizing? Has anyone ever told you that?
Well, from my understanding from their advertising is that they're providing services 40% cheaper than wheelchair accessible taxis. But that's not the point. The point here is there's a business that's trying to create opportunity for people to take advantage of their business. That's what it's about.
I'm simply exploring this notion of the need to subsidize what is a more expensive service.
Mm-hmm.
So, but what I wanted to ask on the safety side, it's awkward.
It's
isn't
awkward.
It, with
I'm
this thing
seeing
here?
you through that pigeonhole.
Councillor,
Yeah, exactly.
Your last question, Councillor Davis.
So Uber Wave, though, would you not agree that they are using licensed taxis now?
The only reason why
TTLs, a lot of them. Is
they
that
are
right?
using TTLs.
Yes.
Absolutely they are. That's how they're growing their business. And I just want to acknowledge as well, as I know Luke has mentioned a wait time between 20 and 7 minutes.
Yes.
I think for the downtown core that may be reasonable, but there's still people that are not receiving services on both sides.
Thank you.
We should.
The Councillor Burnside, you're next.
Thank you. Mine's just a quick question, actually. Because you're here, really, I think, mostly to talk about your lived experience.
I'm here representing Spinal Cord Injury Ontario.
But, within that, you have a good idea of people's lived experience?
For sure. I've been living with spinal cord injury for 21 years.
Thank you. I'm just trying to gather information here. Do you feel the service to your community, if you will, is better or worse or the same since Uber came to the city?
I think on both sides, services have improved. I think there's been genuine competition that's been happening between the two industries that has improved customer service and improved the availability of people receiving service.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Uciara, you're next.
Yes, just one question on the working group, the committee that you were suggesting. So
Yes.
exactly what would that committee be involved with?
I think we need to bring the right people at the table who are experts in this area to continue a dialogue around how things are moving forward. I would suggest disability organizations. I would suggest licensees. I would suggest insurance companies. I think you need to look at who your key informants are in this industry, and you need to continue having these discussions on improving fair and equity service. I think we've been pushed really quickly into creating some bylaws. I think the staff have done a good job but there's 107 bylaws, and we have to make a quick decision on May 2nd whether this is the right thing to do or not. And I don't think you guys have all the information to make the right decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is now, Councilor Karijanis, you're next.
Thank you for coming, sir. Really appreciate your thoughts. But you're here to talk about safety and fairness, am I correct?
I'm here to talk about fair and equitable service for everybody in the City of Toronto.
And you mentioned that there's 107 recommendations that the staff have come up with.
Yes.
Have you read them?
Yes.
Have you read the ones that say that one set of rules apply to Uber and another set of rules apply to the cab industry? And do you think that's fair?
It's not a question of me whether I think it's fair. It's a question of whether we're trying to build a system that is equitable in an open market for everybody where people can compete for business.
Look, I appreciate your views. However, I'm going to ask one more time, and you might want to answer, you might not.
Councilor Karijanis, he did answer the question. You may not like what he answered, but he asked the question quite clearly.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Do you think it's fair how one industry will give $8 million to the city for municipal bylaws and for us to be able to police what's happening out there, and the other one will only give $3.4 million? Uber with 15,000 cars will be giving to the city $3.4 million, according to the executive director, and the taxi cab industry with 5,000 cars will be giving $8 million. Do you think that's fair?
No, it doesn't. Again, I didn't read that part of the bylaw, so I can't really reference to that. Is that in reference to the fund?
You don't have to answer that question if you don't have information, sir.
No, that's in reference to the fees that Uber will be paying. Uber will be paying, the drivers will be paying $10 per driver and something like 20 cents a ride. And the calculations come out to about 15,000 cars for $3.4 million, while the taxi cabs will be giving to the city.
Your question? The question, please. Yeah.
It's coming. Just, I still have 3 minutes. Be patient. Be patient, Chair. Be patient. Please be patient. I just want to make sure that if you want to put my time on hold, please, if you want to have a dialogue with me.
Okay.
Thank you. And the taxi cabs will be paying $8 million. So 15,000 Uber vehicles, 3.4, they should be paying actually 24, and cabs are paying 8. So we're allowing offshore billionaires to walk away with $20.4 million. Is that fair? I mean, you want to talk about fairness and equity. Is that fair to you, sir?
Well, as you described that, sure, that sounds unfair from your perspective in the way you're describing it, but I'm not sure. I really don't have much information around how you're describing that. But one comment I do want to make is you continue to say 20 cents to the drivers, and that document did not say that the drivers are going to be charged. It said that 20 cents per ride, but it didn't say it was the drivers that are going to pay.
Drivers will have to pay $10 in order to be registered. But anyways. Let me ask you a question. The last question that I have. Would you feel safer riding in a car that is inspected twice a year by a city, or would you be safer that something gets only checked once a year in a back alley?
I think they need to strengthen the safety regulations that's been proposed thus far.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilor Di Giorgio. Next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think I'd like to move a motion to extend for an additional 10, 15 minutes to hear the remaining speakers.
Members of the committee, we have a motion before us to extend the timing to complete the next two speakers that we have, and then we'll adjourn for lunch. That's the motion before us. I was very mindful in terms of the timing. That special accommodation. All those in favor of extending the time? It carries. Against? It carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try and be brief. I understand your position. You're basically saying that the arrival of Uber has not only introduced competition, but they are the main catalyst to drive fares down and to provide better service. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say Uber specifically. I think that opening up the market to more competition will create better customer service and reduce fares.
Are you aware that Uber, in introducing so-called innovation into the industry, could only do it by breaking the rules?
I don't really have a comment on that.
What I'm saying is that the industry itself, if they felt that they didn't need to obey the law and could exercise breaking rules, we're very capable of introducing the kind of innovation that presumably Uber has brought to the marketplace.
Yeah, well, I can argue the same way in saying up until 2014, the city was breaking the law by not providing on-demand accessible services for people with physical disabilities.
So you're saying the city failed, period?
I didn't say the city didn't provide that service up until 2014.
But if I tell you that the city could have provided that service by saying to the taxi industry, look, feel free to break the law to provide any service for the
I'm not asking anybody to break the law. I'm just asking for fair and equitable services so I can get around and live independently and live a full community like everybody else in the city.
Okay. Let's not engage into a debate, and please, any questions, let's do it through the chair. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, thanks so much for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next deputant is number 65, Tracy Smith. Thank you, ma'am, for waiting, and good to have you here.
No, that's okay.
Whenever you are ready, please go
Whenever I'm
ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. My name is Tracy Schmidt, and I was born a four-way amputee. They don't know why, it's just a fluke. So this has been my lived experience. I also do accessibility consulting and accessibility training. And one of the reasons that I'm a consultant is that it's very challenging as a person with a disability to get employment because of reliable transportation. And for me, without Uber, we lose Uber Assist and Uber Wave. So as you can see, I walked in here with my artificial legs, both legs above knee, so I can use Uber Assist. But I also use a power chair to maintain stamina, so I also use Uber Wave, the wheelchair accessible vehicle. And without Uber, we lose Uber Assist and Uber Wave. And my experience since Uber has greatly improved. As an individual looking for employment and looking for a social life and looking to go on spontaneous dates, for example, is being able to have on-demand rides is incredible. And I'm very grateful that the city brought those 200 licenses for accessible vehicles, but right now Wheel-Trans is such a stretched service that Wheel-Trans, I don't know the official facts, but I know informally that about 20% of the Wheel-Trans rides are with the buses, and the other 80% is with the wheelchair accessible taxis. And so although you granted so many wonderful taxis that were accessible, they quickly got sucked up and used by a greatly needed Wheel-Trans service. And so you book Wheel-Trans in advance. If you know you have a medical need or a job, that's pre-booked months in a regular system. So you phone in advance for Wheel-Trans, you start at 7 a.m., and you dial over and over and over and over and over, and you may get in with a pre-booked ride with Wheel-Trans, that a wheelchair-accessible taxi will come because Wheel-Trans is paying the wheelchair-accessible taxi. But Uber gives me an on-demand ride with a reasonable length of time. But even if it was on-demand in an hour or two, that would be something that I could work with. I arrived from an airport after a consulting contract, and I've been left stranded at an airport at midnight, taking my power chair out onto the public way until I could get something to get home many times. And what I love about Uber is the positive experience as well. I know that taxis get training, but my experience 100% of the time, and I take a lot of taxis, is that every single time they ask me, "Oh, what happened to you?" Meaning as a four-way amputee. And I'm really lucky that I was born this way, and that's not too hard of a question, but it's an inappropriate question. It's personal. It's like asking someone why they're divorced. It's not appropriate until you're long-term friends. And some people can answer that question, and some people can't. But nobody should ask that question. And it's about being people first, and about just asking and just listening. And so 4 simple messages: don't ask about my disability, people first, just ask, just listen. And Uber, every single time, is an extraordinary positive experience. So I don't know what the training disparity is, but it's a wonderful experience for me. So I get on demand. The other challenge for me is that I work across borders. So for example, I'm an aspiring Paralympian in sailing, and I do guest speaking, and I was at Milton Velodrome with my power chair, and something went mechanical with a bus, and I couldn't get back. There were no cross-border systems with Wheel-Trans or others to get from one part of GTAA to another part of a city. And so with on-demand Uber, I can get across border. So with Uber comes Uber Assist and Uber Wave, and it allows me on demand, it allows me cross-border. The other thing that Uber does for me is myself and many of my friends that are having so much trouble with employment is we're granted more employment. I have many friends who are hard of hearing that are driving Uber. I have many friends that use wheelchairs that are driving Uber. And so it's increasing employment as well for my friends in my community. And I understand the comments about back alley, but I also want you to know that I feel much safer with Uber, and I don't know why that is officially as an individual, but my experiences have been safer.
Thank you. Questions? If not, thank you. Councilor Nunciara.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you. So you've read the report, and you've read all the recommendations. So you support the recommendations that the staff have proposed? All the recommendations?
I'd love for you to be more specific, but I'm an individual that isn't a politician, so I don't understand what I'd be agreeing to there and what I support.
No, I was just wondering if you read the report, and I mean, you spoke about you do use Uber, and you're very happy with the service.
I'm very happy with the service.
With it. So you mentioned that you did have some experiences with Wheel-Trans in the past.
Yes.
Which I know exactly because I've got constituents that have experienced that as well. So with Wheel-Trans, you've experienced where you're booking days in advance, and sometimes they don't show up, and they're late. So as far as Uber, you have that service, and it's delivered to you on time, and you're happy with the service. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Davis, you are next.
Thank you again for coming. I know how intimidating it feels standing there.
Yes.
It's hard to get up there. I did just want to ask the same questions I asked the others. That do you think that we ought to have safety standards for all vehicles that drive, for higher accessible ones as well, in this Toronto taxi industry?
So
Ground transportation.
So I think the way the safety standards are in existence right now, they sound black and white, exactly what I would want to feel safer, but I feel safer with Uber.
Okay, no, to the crowd,
Please,
it
members
doesn't
of
help. Everybody's points of view.
Councillor Davis,
you can ask me why.
That's
I'll
your
stop
role,
your time
I
for a
know.
second. Members of the public, you've been so good so far, but I'd like to emphasize once again, as chair of the committee, it is my job, it is my responsibility to maintain order, decorum, and civility in these chambers. So let's proceed with a bit of caution. You may not like what's been said, but everyone deserves respect as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My understanding is that Uber has been using Dignity Transport and TTLs to meet their requirements. So Dignity...
For Uber Wave, for the wheelchair accessible vehicles specific, but
right.
not for Uber Assist.
Okay, so Uber Assist is provided by whom?
By all the UberX drivers that get close to a top 5 rating. So there's 1,000 of them that were trained with accessibility training. And so you must have a top rating customer experience, and you must have an in-person live customer service training for a 90-minute session in order to be an Uber Assist driver. And Uber Assist is about door-to-door, so they get out of their vehicles. And I think Uber Assist and Uber Wave and wheelchair accessible taxis is great for moms with prams. It's great for people who are older. It's great for people who break their leg. I think it's a great service that's needed by everybody, not just people with disabilities.
Uber Assist, do they have commercial insurance and all of the provisions? Do you
I'm
know
not
that?
equipped with those answers, but I know that Uber Assist works just like the rest of Uber.
X. Like Uber X.
Yeah, that is my personal
which is-
customer off-the-street experience.
Okay,
I'm not an Uber staff, I don't know
So I was just trying to understand that sector. And that system is with, those aren't accessible vehicles necessarily, right?
They're not accessible vehicles, but there's so many people that use manual chairs or have crutches or walkers, and they just need, or people who are older adults, you know, the community's aging, 65 and older, and...
It just finally, you're not opposed to having the safety requirements for specialized, clearly you think specialized training should be there. Are you opposed to those other requirements like snow tires, commercial insurance, signage, cameras to protect drivers, first aid training, vulnerable persons background
you.
checks? Are you opposed to those?
My concern is that right now I've got accessible transportation, and so I don't want to lose accessible transportation, and I feel safe, but I would love for those to be in place, but not at the cost of losing Uber Assist and Uber Wave.
So why would Uber not want to have?
That was your last question.
I bet they do.
Councillor Carichanis, you are next.
As an individual that has a mother that uses Wheel-Trans,
I'm sorry, I don't know where I'm talking. Oh, there you are. Hello, hello.
I believe Wheel-Trans charges us the same as a token fare of TTC. Am I correct in that?
Wheel-Trans is the same fare, but not the same service.
Sorry, hold on. Same fare, whatever it is. What does an Uber Assist or Uber, whatever you call it, charge you to take you, let's say, from Scarborough to downtown?
It can, I think it's about 26, I think. I don't know. You'd have to, but it's the same price as what anybody else would pay. And what's great about that, I think maybe the reason their customer service is so fabulous is because the headquarters supplement money for those drivers to do that service.
Thank you. But however, my mother with a bus pass for a year, for a month, like some $120, would be able to get around every single day to go to her shopping, to go downtown, and everything else. And if she was to get Uber, whatever you call it, she would have to pay $20, $26, $20.
Your question, please.
Daily. And if she's on fixed income, how can she afford that?
Well, Uber Assist is for people, just like taxis is for people that want to pay for the taxi or pay for their Uber Assist ride.
But you came here criticizing Wheel-Trans, and my mother uses Wheel-Trans from time to time, and she finds the service incredible, and she tells me that it's great. So I'm just wondering if my mother is wrong.
I don't know your mother's experience, but I know my experience for 25 years on a weekly basis is I can't be a reliable employee with a consistent time. I need a flexible employer, and if there's spontaneous meetings or spontaneous after-work events, those aren't things that I can have accommodated with Wheel-Trans. And I know they're doing the best they can, and I'm glad they sucked up the 200 extra wheelchair-accessible taxis to try to provide more service, but it's not leaving on-demand ride outside of Wheel-Trans. And Wheel-Trans is doing the best they can, but it is not timely.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Schmidt. Thank you for your presentation.
I can walk away?
Yeah,
Okay.
well done. Thank you. The next deputant is Shafur Hawk. Shafur Hawk.
I will be interpreting on his behalf.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you for coming. You have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Hello, my name is Safil Hahu, and I'm an Uber driver. Sorry. There are 3 things I would like to speak to you about today. One, why I am an Uber driver, why I love Uber, and why I support Uber. Okay, sorry, I'm just asking him to slow down. I can't interpret that fast. The first thing is that why I'm an Uber driver is that Uber is flexible. It allows me to have my own business. It gives me opportunities to, gives opportunities to deaf people. Okay, you have to slow down, sorry. It supports the disability community. He gets to interact with people on a daily basis. Why I love Uber is riders are receptive for him being a deaf person. He is able to communicate by text message, notes, and gestures. There's no barriers as he is open to all people. A lot of people ask him, you know, how can a deaf person work and drive? And he shares information about his disability. He feels that the customers and himself work together to arrive safely. He uses GPS. It's a very important tool for him. They text back and forth so that they can clarify destinations, and they work together as a group. He demonstrates that deaf people can be active in the community and to be able to be viable community members. The common reaction he gets from a lot of people is that they're happy that a deaf person is now working in this community. Why he supports Uber is that services are increased for accessibility for all people, and people are treated fairly. Deaf individuals are more free of worry when they use Uber because they're more comfortable using text to make requests for pickup and drop-offs. Sorry, hold on. Can you say that again one more time? Uber has really helped to increase flexibility among the deaf community because the communication is very clear through texting. He says that Uber scheduling is more flexible. He's able to use FaceTime if he needs to. It helps the deaf community provide direct, clear communication and reduces frustration. They feel a lot safer because the communication is more clear. The way, yeah. The way Uber is set up, it makes it easier for a deaf driver and a rider not to have misunderstandings. It also allows, Uber is very accessible, conscious. 4 years ago, he happened to go into a taxi, and there was 4 deaf people that got into the taxi, and the driver wouldn't take him personally and his friends because they couldn't communicate with each other on where they needed to arrive. But then with Uber, when he used Uber as himself, he was able to have that communication, be able to get to his destination a lot better.
Please wrap up.
Yeah, so as a deaf client, he has a hard time calling and try to make appointments. They're not finished, the communication is not clear, and he feels that they keep hanging up on the phone. And then finally, the cab driver came and there was some miscommunication and he arrived late. Yeah, and okay. No, go ahead. He feels that the deaf community really feel that Uber supports them a lot better because it increases communication.
Thank you, Mr. Hawk, and also thank you for the excellent translation. Any questions to the deputant? If not, thank you for your presentation. Members of the audience, now, so we are going to... We're going to adjourn now, and we'll resume at 10 minutes to 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Is he not here today? What an idiot. I would like to see him and tell him to his face he's an idiot. What a bastard.
What did you say? Yeah.
How are you, sir?
I am okay,
Nice
sir. How
to
are
see
you?
you.
Nice to see you.